What is going on, and welcome to The Script. I am your host, Isaac Paul. I want to welcome you all to a conversation that is unfiltered, unscripted, and unapologetically real. Now, each week, The Script dives headfirst into stories shaping our lives, from headlines lighting up your feed to the love dramas unfolding in your DMs. Powered by real talk and raw perspective, this live experience blends culture, commentary, and community with the pulse on what matters now. Whether it's politics, relationships, or the internet's latest hot mess, we are breaking it all down with insight, humor, and just enough side eye. This isn't just a show, it's a front row seat and the conversation you didn't know you needed. Now, this has been a very exciting collaboration between myself, Isaac Paul, the Tequila Tales, and BlackDoctor.org. I'm always really big to just kind of give big ups to BlackDoctor.org, which is an organization that seeks to align people with healthcare practitioners of color. Once again, I'm always good to say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with other healthcare practitioners, but sometimes people of color have special needs. And what we are searching for is someone that understands the nuances of who we are in our culture, the subtleties, right? Sometimes you are seeking to be aligned with someone that understands you on a deeper level, kind of beyond the charts. And so, if you're not plugged in with BlackDoctor.org, I want to recommend that you do so. And it's not just about physical health, it's about mental health, emotional health, financial health. So definitely, follow them if you're not doing so already. I want to make it clear that I am streaming across multiple platforms, right? So we're at about 5 different locations right now. So there may be some times where you're in a room that's popping and maybe 50 people in that particular room, or you might be the only person that's viewing it on that particular channel. However, regardless of where you are at, I have the ability to see your comments, right? Almost like this one right here. Uh-oh, white folks did it again. I don't even know what that means, right? But as you see, I have the ability to interact with you all in real time, right? So this is a live show. Now, I am going to be sharing a segment that I recorded earlier today. So I'm having on this exact same outfit. I just finished recording it probably about an hour and a half ago because we were in different time zones. And so I wanted to be able to fit this conversation in, because what we are going to be keying into today is a conversation that we call Feel Like Talking. Okay, now Feel Like Talking, just to give you a brief description, is an unscripted, unfiltered conversation between people who've lived, learned, and still have questions, right? It is where the real ones come to unpack life, whether it's tech, relationships, culture, or those uncomfortable truths that we tend to avoid. Now, this segment isn't about interviews. It's about honest dialogue. And it's the kind of conversation that starts with a laugh, it slides into hard truths, and somehow leaves you feeling better for having listened, right? When you feel like talking, you're not just filling time, you're filling gaps that too many people are afraid to cross. So tonight, my special guest is one of my dearest friends. And, we're going to talk about some AI. We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about love and relationships. It's going to be a very, very good conversation. And, it gets a little dicey at certain points, right? But in a good way. So I'm not going to lead in too much because it's quite a bit that we cover in this discussion. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump right into it. And like I said, I want you guys to feel free to share this. So go ahead and share it now, right? Because the more people that come in, the more people that can interact. So if you're watching it live and you want more people to dive in, just go ahead and click that little share button. We can get more people in, and feel free to comment, because as I just pointed out a moment ago, I have the ability, bam, to share your comments, right? We are in the building. I got Successes University in the building. So yeah, so let's go ahead and just dive right into it. Tonight, we're starting a new segment I'm calling Feel Like Talking. And who better to kick it off with than my brother of over 17 years, Omar Jones. He's a sharp mind in the tech and sales space, but more than that, he's someone I've had countless late night convos with, where we go from laughing at memes to unpacking the state of our people in one breath. So tonight, we're going to have a little bit of both, but we're going to do it live, right? So with that being said, welcome to the stage my good brother, Omar Jones. Brother, what is going on, man? How you feeling, man?
What's good? It's a beautiful day.
Absolutely, man. So Man, a whole lot for us to discuss, man. And obviously, I'm gonna go ahead and just dive right into it. I could start with, all the stories about our background. I could go into, your technical background, your sales background, your illustrious history. One of the things I always say, man, that's incredible is like some of your past stories. You know how people used to say, like, man, last night was like a movie. They say that, but it really don't be like a movie, or it's the kind of movie you don't really care to see, right?
It's a short film.
Right, on PBS, but real talk, man, we could go all over the space, but I did want to be targeted with this particular conversation because one of the things that you and I talk about a lot, and not just since it's been popular, but I think since we first really caught wind of it, because both of us tend to kind of keep our ear close to the ground, and regardless of how we mature, we've always tried to stay like really in the know, like really tapped in, always trying to figure out like what's on the horizon, whether that be, music or culture, business, politics, and so what's big now that none of us can get away from is AI, right? And, I wanted to kind of speak about specifically in the business space, right? So, you work in a space where value is often theoretical, right? Especially in startups. And a moment ago I said that, I wasn't gonna go deep into your business background, but that is one of the things that you work with a lot. Our startups, go-to-market strategies, and just a lot of different things inside of the business world. So what I wanted to start with is I wanted to talk about valuation, right? And why do you think valuation has replaced credit as the new gatekeeper in business? So we're gonna go ahead and just dive right in on the deep end. Like, as I was thinking on it, I was like, that's kind of the space that we're in right now, where everybody's talking about like the valuation, how much a company, is valued. And so I wanted to know why do you think that is the case, and do you think it is a gatekeeper as far as business goes?
Well, I mean, that's a lot to unpack there in a short time period. But think about it like this, or the way I like to think about, evaluation. What is it based on? Because at
Right.
the end of the day, everybody's creating the same thing. Let's say when ChatGPT launched and everyone learned about it, everyone was building on top of it, and everyone was saying, their businesses were X, Y, and Z. But the reality is, valuation is really determined what someone is willing to pay for it.
Mm,
And if we talk about the tech sector and just like, let's say, software as a service or AI, it really comes down to a couple things in terms of what the valuation you would place on it. I guess it would mainly be, the growth trajectory, how big can it get, and what is the revenue or reoccurring revenue that's driving those numbers. But a lot of time, most of the numbers are very artificial because something could happen, the business goes down, it goes away, and then what is it worth then, right? So at the end of the day, it's really about what someone is willing to pay for it. And a lot of times the valuation is based on the opportunity,
mm,
because again, it depends on what they're buying, right? If I'm investing in something, what am I buying? And AI burns a lot of cash because it
right.
takes a lot of energy, to stand it up. And there's a lot of AI companies that aren't producing revenue right now. But then what is the value of it? The value is in the future. So a
Mm,
lot of times they're selling the future or selling the valuation based on the future. But
okay.
in the tech space, traditionally, before a lot of these softwares and AIs came around, it was really built off, well, what is your revenue? And then you would put a multiple to it and say, this is what we look to do over the next 3 or 4 years. And then the investors can say, will I be able to get my money back? And then a little piece of some after 10, 15 years. So it's different ways you can, I guess you can add value to a business. But at the end of the day, it's like, what do you determine value, or what are you willing to pay? Right.
Mhm. So, before we get into some of the other questions that I had as it relates to like in this segment, as it relates to business and valuations, I guess one of the things that I'm also curious about is because I don't think that the concept of it is new, but I feel like the conversation around it is new, right? Like, let's take 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this was not a word that we heard a lot of. We didn't hear a lot about valuations. And then it kind of almost felt like the moment that it entered the business space, that's all everybody talks about. You know what I mean? And so it's not something that was invented because of, just as you just pointed out, like it really is, you know, not only determined by what someone is willing to pay, but then it's also like, our projection of what we think your future value is going to be, right? Like we, you know, using a lot of different factors and a lot of different variables, they are trying to assess, what do we think the value of your business is going to be in 5 or 10 years? You know, do you think that this is a good thing for us to be doing as it relates to business? Do you think that the moment that this entered this business space, like, has it been a net positive or has it been a net negative?
That's another loaded question.
Right.
But what I can tell you from conversations that I've had with investors that are in this space, and they know much more than I know.
Okay.
You know, the way they would frame it is there's too much money and not enough deals. And what does that mean? That means we have way too much money floating around in our ecosystem and not enough places to park it. It's only so much real estate you can, it's like it's only so much real estate you can buy, right? Before you need to diversify, you know. And you know, there's only so many companies, and there's only so many, you know, companies, business, those sort of things you can invest in. You know, you're not going to put all your money in gold. You may not put all your money in Bitcoin. So where else can you put your money where you can, you know, kind of beat inflation, or you want your money to keep up with inflation? So SaaS is all, or SaaS and AI is starting to kind of be the play there outside of other players that enter the game. But at the end of it all, the way you got to think about it is, where can people park their money where, one, it'll beat inflation, and then there'll be some, you know, kind of return on investment.
Okay. And you know, I like to get your perspective of it, because I know that there's a lot of on a lot of topics you and I see things very similarly, you know. But then there's other areas where you and I like to challenge one another, you know, and I'm always excited about our spirited debates, right? Because it doesn't matter what sector we go into. I think just because both of us are critical thinkers, you know, but we might approach a topic from a different vantage point, you know, especially depending upon the level of experience that we've had in that space, you know. And so I know when it comes to like dealing with startups, when it comes to dealing with, you know, tech companies, and even inside of that corporate space, you've got a lot more experience than I do, you know. I'm seeing it more, I think, through a entrepreneurial slash even creative space, you know, and knowing that, you know, the creative, our mindset is always trying to make more with less, trying to do more with less, and finding creative ways to ultimately achieve whatever that objective is. But, you know, the term starving artist is like a real thing, right? Like, and so most creatives are accustomed to having to work with less, you know. And even when we attempt to sell our product, then that's where the relationship with the business comes into play. And that's where the friction comes, because it's not that we don't think that what, you know, the business mind or the managers or whatever is doing is invaluable. We think it's valuable, but it's more or less that we understand the clash in how we view things, you know. And I've been having some conversations with people recently when we just talk about like the state of things right now as it relates to the economy. And, you know, I got into this pretty interesting conversation with this one gentleman where, you know, more or less my stance was that I think that one of the things that is ruining like the economy right now in terms of this rut that we are trying to get out of, and by rut, I don't necessarily mean the overall economy, but just the majority of the people's access to it, right? And just how like your average person does not feel like they actually have a seat at the table, you know, a voice or just whatever. And to me, it kind of feels like it's so top heavy right now, right? Like you said, like, you know, you've got a lot of money in the game, you know, but then to me, it almost feels like it's fraudulent a little bit, right? It's funny money, you know, because we are saying that a person's valuation is based on these things, but not based off of actual revenue generating things all the times, right? Like a lot of times someone might be a billion on paper and they haven't even sold a product yet, right? And so I guess like, and that's what I was just getting at. Like we've seen companies worth billions on paper without being profitable. Meanwhile, you'll have entrepreneurs, specifically even Black entrepreneurs who can't even get a small business loan, right? And so, why do you feel the rules always feels like they're being rewritten mid-game when it comes to, the little guy or even the guy in the middle sometimes, right? Because that's what I was even just getting at when I was like, this valuation thing seems new. It feels like something new that they've created as a new means of like gatekeeping and keeping people outside of it, because of the fact that, if we're dealing with a business that's not profitable or whatever, then it's all kind of like our perception of what we think is going to be the value. As you point out a moment ago, right? Like, can I convince someone that this thing is worth something, right? So isn't it kind of gatekeeping us a little bit?
I think you can look at it in different ways because one of the examples I always go with, because as I work with founders and entrepreneurs, startups, and if they're trying to raise funding, they always focus on kind of like the product. This product's great, it's going to change the world, and it's like that doesn't mean anything to someone that's willing to to put money up, right? And the example I always give is the Fitbit example. Fitbit didn't even have a product or a technology. They did something like a survey saying if you had something that you can wear on your wrist that did X, Y, and Z, is that something you would use? And they sent it out. And then once they got the feedback that people were like, yeah, they would use something like this, they went and got the money to go build Fitbit. Where you see a lot of people today, they're spending hours and days on a product that most likely no one wants, right? Just because I think it's great doesn't mean everyone else thinks it's great. And every investor, the way they invest in things is different than every other investor, right? One investor might be looking for, what is the IP? Like, if this goes to crap, is this something I can sell off for parts, right? I worked at companies that had $10 billion valuations and now they're at zero today. So it depends on what it is, and how the market reacts to it, and can they bring that product to market or that service to market and really impress people where they get excited and they want to pull money out of their pocket. Because at the end of the day, if you won't pay for it, it doesn't matter what I think or what anyone thinks about how great this product is. So let's go back to, what does this mean for the average person?
Right.
Because the challenge, I think, for the average person is, I think the term you used was seat at the table.
Right.
And unfortunately, you got to kind of earn your seat at the table. Like, but the thing is, you can have a seat at the table, but I think most people, they're in a very limited belief in terms of who's at the table and who should be at the table. So what do I mean by that? Like, most people, sometimes they have an entitlement where they feel they should be at the table, right? And it's just like, okay, what have you done to have a seat at the table? You haven't. Okay, maybe you need to start from A before you can get to Z, and that's the one thing. But then let's talk about investing in stocks in general. Most of the stocks are owned by the same people, the same percentage of people. Most Americans, or the average American, is not invested in the stock market, but that is where you can invest, right? If you invested in these companies, you actually now have a seat at the table. But most people aren't investing in these products, right? They don't do the research. And the way I always break this down is like this. I break it down like, think about your Jackson Hewitt and your HR blocks, right? You have people that know how to do taxes. They use the software, they do your taxes. You have those people that maybe, they have some experience with doing taxes, and some of them may be educated quite well in taxes. What separates them for the people that do the taxes of billionaires? What separates them is the people that do the taxes for billionaires. They've read all 4,000 pages of the tax code. They understand it inside and out, and they understand the loopholes. Only thing it is a separation of information. If you ask someone in H&R Block, like, hey, this went on, they don't know. They have to go ask somebody, ask another person. And that's what separates those two people. One person put in the work to get all the information, and the other person is dealing with the information they were given, right? So I don't think there's gatekeeping to that level. I think there's ways you can get in there, but if you're looking for someone to do the running and the walking for you, then no, you won't have a seat at the table. But if you put in the work and you know your stuff and you get in front of it or around, get in front of it around the right people, right? You're bound to get the seat at the table. But if you're not putting in the work, no one's going to knock on your door and say, "Hey, man, you want a great opportunity?" Like that's just not the way life works. It's just like it's like the opportunities meet you when you're working and when you're going somewhere, right? But if you're just sitting in the house doing nothing, opportunity is not going to knock on the door and see if you're home. That's just a reality.
So, keeping in mind with that, like, do you think that there's a way that we can hack the system, like to
Yes,
benefit from it, like others do?
yes. I think I think the old saying from my neighborhood was, if in probably most other neighborhoods, if you want to hide something from a crook, put it in the book.
Hmm.
Mark Cuban did an interview and he talked about reading these books, and he learned about you can buy patents that come up for renewal, and he ended up buying the patent for the flat screen television. And so he buys the patent. So every time a flat screen television is sold, he gets a check or a royalty check based on that patent. So the opportunities are there, but they're not going to knock on your door. And I forgot who said. I think it was. I want to say it was either Einstein or Thomas Edison said something to the degree of, "It's opportunity all around you. It's just dressed in overalls and look like work." It was something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it was something like that. And I believe that. And I think there are some people that are always looking for the opportunity, the next step. Where else can I go? What else can I do? And I think some people, unfortunately, sometimes they sit around for someone else to do it for them, or they're waiting on the government. And if you wait on someone to do it, or if you wait on the government, you're going to end up waiting. Just like all the other people that are sitting in the graveyard. Here's the person lies who waited. It's like, it's like here's the person he who waited for opportunity to arrive. And it's just the way it is. Now, let me say another thing too, with that in mind, because I also want to say that do I think do I think we've been steered toward the right information? Absolutely not.
Hmm.
I don't think so. And do I think some people have the ability to go learn and do it on their own? Some. Most can't, unfortunately, because a fish doesn't know it's in water. And if you grew up in a household where you weren't surrounded by people that were go-getters or entrepreneurs or a store owner or someone who worked in corporate America, then there's a lot of information that's not passed down to you inadvertently. But it's like if you grew up in a house full of doctors, you'll probably go to medical school and do something in that field because that was your influence. And unfortunately, if you grew up around people that were just on welfare or whatever, not doing anything, you'll most likely repeat that cycle because now you have the information on how to survive with little bit of nothing.
Hmm.
So it's all about the information that you receive, but it's also being able to determine what to keep and what to throw away from that information, because not all information that you receive is good, but not all information you receive is bad.
Right.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. So, to kind of round this segment out, and to make it, specifically as much as possible, even about our community, because you kind of just even went there in terms of understanding the reality that many of us don't come from the type of households of affluence, or even just sometimes from education, unfortunately, where we do get access to that, but not just even access to the information, but a model, right? Because
Yeah.
as you pointed out, if your parents are this, or if they're already doing this, and there's a really good chance that at the very least you get access to that, and you get someone that you see it putting that information into motion, and it makes it attractive to you. If we were going to round this segment out with just like either a golden nugget, or a bit of advice, what would you tell a young Black founder trying to play the game? Do you think that they should bootstrap, chase valuation, or build slow and solid?
Neither. I would tell them don't do it. The thing is, not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. Not
That's
everyone
it.
needs to be a solopreneur. It's a different mindset. It's a whole different beast. But if you were to go down that path, the first thing I would do is stop thinking about how much money you're going to make.
Mm.
Because every time I hear someone talk about, man, if I get 10,000 people and I'm charging X amount of money, that's $100 million. And I'm like, you see, you already lost, right? You never think about it that way. People that are real builders, solopreneur entrepreneurs, and what separates a lot of them is the way they think about it is, how many people can I help? Can I really help this person? Can I really change this person's life? Like, what is the impact? I was talking to a tech founder a couple weeks ago, and he was kind of having the same conversation, and I was like, stop thinking about it that way, because if you start going down that rabbit hole, you take your eyes off the prize on what you actually need to do. And so the example I gave him, I said, think about, you know, your goal is to get someone to make a decision to pull money out of their pocket. If no one's spending money or no one's pulling out their credit card, it doesn't matter what their opinion is, what their advice is on it. It doesn't matter. If they're not going to spend any money on it, it doesn't matter. It's useless. It's a waste of your time. But think about something simple like the remote control for your television. We're about the same age. So you remember the day you had to get up and change the
We
channel,
are
or
the
your
same place.
but remember, but you were the remote control. If you're my age, you were the remote control. Your
Right.
parents made you get up to change the television, right?
I plan to do it with Alex. Make no mistake about it. That's a rite to passage.
Right, but remember
all
that,
kinds
right?
of shit he gonna have to get from me other room to be clear.
Right. So we all experience that. Like universally, we can all say we have some experience on that. Like if you're around our age, right? But younger people don't know the pain that was to get up and change the television after 30 minutes or so, and you did that all day if you're sitting there watching TV.
Right.
But someone got annoyed and says, I'm going to do something about it. Someone said, I'm going to create something that changes the television so I can sit my butt on this couch and I don't have to get up. And you can go look up who invented it, because you'll laugh at who invented it. You say, man, black people know how to figure some things out, but they don't want to do something. But what I would say, that because the top questions I always get from people is, what kind of business to start, right? That's always a question everyone has, and I always tell them the same thing. There's two things you can look at. You could do. The first one is you can scratch your own itch. That goes back to the guy sitting on the couch with the remote control, like, man, I'm getting really sick and tired of getting up to change this television. That was scratching his own itch. Like, I'm going to create something that I know I will use, and I'm sure other people are dealing with this problem. So that's the first one, is scratch your own itch. The other thing is you can build a better mousetrap. Okay, so how do you build a better mousetrap? Think about something you get excited about, something you've experienced, or maybe it was a service, or maybe it's just a product where you're like, man, this could be so much better if it had X, Y, and Z. How many people are always somewhere and they don't like the way something is going? They say, man, if they did this would make this so much better. There's the opportunity right there, right? You're creating a better mousetrap. And so when you think about most of the things that are invented today, they're just better mousetraps. But again, how do you do that? Well, the first thing you could do, find what you want to improve and go see who's doing something that's similar to what you think you can improve on, and go read the comments. Go read all the comments. What are people complaining about? They're giving you the information, and then take all the information, make sure you look at enough reviews and comments and feedback to say, now I have a hypothesis. Remember a hypothesis back in school? Now you have a hypothesis that people want this, right? And then you take that information and go build the better mousetrap. The easiest ways, right, is to think about it. Because I think sometimes people forget, like, even the little stuff in school about hypothesis, when you did the science projects, right? Because if you think about anything that you want to do, it's basically a science project. Right, because all you're doing is building your hypothesis so you can build a thesis, because all you're doing is testing and you're collecting information, and you want to see, hey, who else can confirm this information? Maybe you're going to another scientist, or you're putting it out there for other people to review your work, right? But that's all we're doing. It's just like, think about like as simple as going to get a job. That's a science project, right? I gotta put together a resume. I got to put it out there and see if I'm getting any feedback. If I don't get any feedback, then my hypothesis, this resume sucks. And I need to redo the resume. And I need to add some stuff on there because not only do I need to get the ATS system, applicant tracking systems, to recognize the resume, because everything is monitored by AI these days.
Right.
But now I also, once it gets through that process, now a human's going to look at it. I have to make sure the resume is appealing to the human, so they want to give me a call or set up an interview. Again, that is a science project. The same thing with the business. You go and look, go do your research, because that's what you do in science. You do your research, then you formulate a hypothesis, and then you go out there and get feedback. And then based on that feedback, let you know if you're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. And the thing is about, most founders and entrepreneurs, and just most people in general, they hate feedback. They hate feedback, and feedback is the only way for you to get better, right? If you just thought you were perfect the way you are, you'd be killing it, right? You'd be closer to God than God at that point, because there's nothing you can improve on. You're just perfect. But feedback is the only way we get better, right? If you launch a product or a service and you sell it to 10 people, if 10 people says it sucks and your attitude or your response is just keep going, they don't know what they're talking about, you've already lost. But if 10 people are like, this sucks, and you go to them and say, hey, I love to understand why this sucks and what makes it better, and 99% of the time they're going to give you the answer to make the business or the service better. That's just a reality. But I think just from our community, like we have to remove our ego. Like we have the strongest egos on planet Earth, right? It's like you're laughing, but you know it's true.
You're gonna get some flack for that one.
No, we do. I can. Jay-Z's whole entire persona is ego. Every rapper's persona, every rapper, every NBA player, and their personas are all based on ego. There are players in the NBA that never touch the court, and they sit on the bench. They have more ego than LeBron James, right? That's just how we roll. Because it's if you think about like where that came from, where did that come from? Why do you think black men in particular always, when they're getting into a conflict, they always say things like "treat me like a man"? That comes from ego. And it's just like, we can all visually see you're a man. There's no need for you to repeat that or keep saying that. But we do it because it's instilled in us, because it comes from a period of time where where our confidence was removed from us during slavery and Jim Crow and those sort of things. Right. So as we gain more freedom, we develop like too much ego. Where everything is about pride. And I remember watching a video, and this is a prime example. One of Jay-Z's friends, or childhood, or I wouldn't say childhood friend, but earlier friends, ended up going to jail for like 10 years or something like that. And he's talking about on this interview, when he got out, Jay-Z wanted to plug him and say, hey, I'm gonna give you $10 million, go buy this building or whatever. And long story short, like the deal didn't go through. And Jay-Z kind of like was like, dude, make it make sense to me. Like, why didn't, you know what I mean? And the guy felt a little like, why are you belittling me? And why are you talking to me that way? But that was, Jay-Z was basically saying like, this is business. Like, yeah, we buddies, but this business, right? This is a transaction. This has nothing to do with feelings. Like my 10 million, I think that building's worth like $100 million today or something like that. Like Jay-Z was trying to put his boy on. And even though his boy was, trying to do right by Jay, he didn't like the way Jay-Z was speaking to him. But at the end of the day, if someone's going to give you a $10 million come up where you set for life, remove your ego from the situation, because everybody loses at that point, right? If you gave me listen, people have gave me less money, have borrowed money from me, and popped off at me for asking it back. You know what I mean? So it's like, and I got ego from them. Right. I got ego from them. And this wasn't $10 million. For $10 million, my ego is completely removed. My pride is completely removed from the conversation, because a $10 million investment easily turned into $100 million. Your families and their families are set for life, right? And I've seen a lot of people with these heavy egos lose really big opportunities. And it's not that they're treating you a certain way, that's just how they come off when it comes to business. Now, if he said Jay was on there calling them all type of names and stuff like that, then I can get it. But someone just saying to you, make it make sense, like you screwed up this deal, I think that's valid. Because even if you were working, it doesn't matter who you're working with. If someone's giving you $10 million and the deal didn't go through, they're going to feel some kind of way. Like, dude, you just screwed up some money, right? The banks don't care, right? When the bill people don't care, they're just cutting it off. They don't care about your ego. They don't care about anything like that. So is one of the things I actually coach a lot of young Black males on is how to remove your ego when you're doing things. And you see this from a lot of people. It's like no one knows everything but someone who knows nothing at all. And we come across those people all the time where they know more than Google. They know more than everyone. But yet they're the ones that's not successful. They're not doing anything right. But yes, they're the cockiest. They have the biggest egos. And so what I try to do is I try to coach young Black males and specifically like remove your ego, because what you want to do as you're interacting with different people is you want to show them that one, you are coachable, and two, you can swallow your pride so you can receive the information, and three, you're able to take criticism. That's it. Those are the people who win. Those are the people that are successful. Every person I've ever met, the most successful people are the people that constantly bang your door down like, I want to get better. I want feedback. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what I can do better. But the people with the biggest egos, they don't know what they're talking about. Oh, they know more than everybody. Whatever. They'll argue people up and down, and then they wonder why they're failing in life. And it's like, it's probably the ego. And it's the reason why they tell you check it at the door when you go into certain places, because you're about to ruin an opportunity. So that's just it. And this is not specific to Black males. It's specific to people in general. Like a lot of people have egos. However, I think outside or non-Black people, they have more of a pride thing, but they're able to swallow their pride if they really want something to get to where they want to go. And they're usually more accepting to feedback. Most people hate criticism, to be right off the bat. Like most people hate criticism. No one likes to be criticized. Criticize. Like most people don't want to be criticized. But what I've seen in all my years is the people that swallow their pride and they put their hand up and say, I need help. And I'll tell you, I'll be the first to admit, I had a lot of ego before I started really downloading the right information, right? But that ego was also driven by ignorance. But now as I have the information, if I don't have a piece of information I'm looking for, I'm comfortable saying, I'm ignorant. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old.
Right.
Because what you do is, when you do that, you flatter the other person and you actually transfer the power over to them. And here's my thing about human nature. People naturally want to help you, but no one wants to help someone with an attitude that's ego, have an ego, and that's ignorant. But if you come across as someone that's coachable, the first thing they'll say is, oh, well, that's okay. Let me explain it to you. Here's what it is. Here's why we do it that way. Now they're giving you the information. But the moment I'm trying to go toe to toe or jump into a pissing contest with you, we can no longer transact now, because now I just made you upset and I insulted you, even though I clearly know you know more than I do, right? So the easiest way to move through this world is act like you're dumb, right? And keep asking questions. Stay curious.
Now, fantastic advice from front to back. And, you know, we've had the discussion about feedback on multiple occasions. And I remember the first time you sharing it with me, well, not even the first time, but I can recall the time that I think it was the most meaningful to me. And it was when I was I was re-entering like the corporate space and was doing a lot of interviewing and was getting a lot of great feedback, but I wasn't, you know, crossing the mantle and actually obtaining the position. I mean, I'm talking like final step. Even people that I was interviewing with was like, yo, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't even know, you know, and it was getting to the point where it was starting to affect me just kind of psychologically. And I remember us having this discussion about feedback, and just the way you painted it, it did help me to remove viewing the situation from a personal perspective. But it was actually pretty inspiring, because even before you began the discourse, you was kind of letting me know, like, I'm really proud of you, and you just kind of went through all the things that I was doing, and was showing me that what I was seeing as failure was actually me getting one step closer to achieving that ultimate, position, right? Or the ultimate goal. And, I really appreciated that. And I've always held on to that whole feedback thing, because you was even telling me, like, when you were working at certain jobs, you don't wait until it's time to get a review to finally tell the manager that, hey, something is going wrong, right? Like, I recall you telling me one time that, like, the moment that something bad is happening, that's when you need to ask for feedback, right? You need to be proactive, and you actually need to go to management. You actually need to go to your superiors and let them know, hey, listen, I'm having a hard time achieving whatever said objective is. Do you have any feedback? Is there anything that I'm doing wrong? Do you mind, like really holding yourself accountable, but then also holding your superiors accountable, right? And not waiting until the review time came, and then having something, to say, and they say, well, why didn't you hit your numbers? And then you've got all of this long list of reasons as to why you weren't able to hit your numbers. And it's like, but did you tell someone about that, right? Did you ask for assistance? Were you vocal about whatever your needs were? Kind of similar to how they used to say in the past, like, a closed mouth does not get fed. And it's always fascinating, the things that we will talk about, the things that we will speak up about, but then those things that we won't speak up about, right? And so we do have to at times hold ourselves accountable, and then even recognize when our pride or our ego is inhibiting us from achieving our objective. Now, that being said, and all the dope stuff that you said, and even the acknowledgement of what initially occurred with our people specifically, that may have us a little bit more like, kind of not necessarily predisposed, but we're probably a little bit quicker to not be able to set it aside because of some of our past experiences, when so much was stripped from us, right?
100%.
And so I appreciate you acknowledging that. But one thing I think that I want to add is, I think that in saying that, I think that in order to be fair and balanced, it's also important that we acknowledge that white people did not have to go through that, right? And so the same way that they are able to at times, be taken by their ego, be taken by their pride, but then sometimes when it counts, be able to step back, and they don't feel like, you're not treating me like a man. It's because they never had to deal with that past trauma, which means on some level that is not only an advantage to them, but it's a privilege that they have, right? So, like, because in good faith, there are times where someone is really just telling you something that you need to hear, and they really are just checking you, and you need to get stronger. But I think that being Black in America sometimes is not always being able to distinguish the difference, right? Because everybody that does criticize you isn't doing it in good faith. Everybody that does criticize you isn't really coming from a space of being disappointed in what it is that you did not achieve. There are some people that come with these predispositions where they just don't like you for something that you had absolutely no control over. And so before we can even react, or before we even have the privilege to be able to say, am I going to be big enough and rise above my ego? I have to be able to fully determine, well, what really is your intention, right? Because if your intention is just to tear me down, and really this feedback that you're giving me is really bullshit, you know what I'm saying? That I have to actively push back against that and fight against that in order to protect my ego, because your feedback sometimes is a strategy that some people will use to tear you down, because you are getting a little too big for your britches, because you are being a little too successful, or they don't like that. So they want to use their position of influence, their position of superiority in whatever that, hierarchical system is, if it's at your job. And so they're not always really giving you honest to God feedback. It's not even always a matter of, I'm giving you this feedback because you did something wrong. It could be, I'm giving you this feedback because I just didn't like you. And so I think that being Black sometimes in America is us always having to try to decipher what's really your motivation, right? And is this really something that I should be using, or is this something that I should psychologically and spiritually be attempting to block myself from because you're trying to tear me down, because you
Well,
recognize how great I am, and what you want to do is keep the lid on me. And so that's what I'm getting at. Like, while I think you have overall what you're saying is good advice, I think that there are sometimes where people really are excelling at their position and they keep getting passed over for that raise. They keep getting sidestepped, and people can never give you honest feedback, because if I gave you the honest feedback, it would be me acknowledging that you intimidate me. It would be me acknowledging that I really just don't like you because of something that has nothing to do with you. And so I just wanted to add that, so that
no. I think that was good pushback.
balance, right?
No, I think that's good pushback, and that's not where I was really hinting to. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Oh
glad
no,
you.
I know, but I'm just saying for
I'm
people
glad.
that are watching, for
I'm
people
glad.
that are watching.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it.
Well,
I'm glad you brought it full circle though, because I like the way you teed it up, because I think that's the thing about feedback. You have to be aware of what's good feedback that you should keep and what feedback is bad, right? So it goes back to, something I said earlier. Like, not all the information you see is going to be good for you. Not all the information you're going to receive is going to be bad for you. And so the way I think about it is, the first step you have to take is you have to understand if you are a product of groupthink.
mm,
That's the first thing. And then you have to understand what's the bad information you need to get rid of. Because a lot of this stuff sits in the back of your way in the back of your mind. And a lot of it, you don't even know you're doing it, right? A lot of this stuff is habit. So again, like when someone says something, I'll go back to the example. When someone says treat me like a man, that's an example of groupthink, because someone else said it before you, and then someone else said it before them, right? You have to understand those triggers, right? And then, like, how do I remove these triggers? And then once you realize, like, maybe this is something that's not going to serve me well in terms of receiving feedback, get rid of it, get it out of your head, right? And then you have to understand what information is good to keep and which to release. So a good example of that, like, if you grew up in a household where your parents had bad money habits and everyone had bad money habits. I mean, most people in the US are very consumer-ish or consumer driven. So everyone just spend it, right? Credit means get it, as Chris Rock used to say, right? And then you finally go off on your own. People don't change. They keep repeating the same cycles, right? They just buy, buy, buy. It's the reason why Amazon has the buy now button, right? Or the click button. They actually have that there for a reason, because psychologically more people will do the buy it now because it's only $20-$30 and it's an impulse buy. So that's why that feature's there, and it's like makes billions of dollars every year. So when you think about information, your brain is the same way. So there's good information, bad information, but to your point, you also don't want people to take advantage of you either, right? And
right.
you want to make sure, if you're giving me good criticism, it should be constructive and it's going to lead to this. For example, when we talked about feedback from a product or service, you don't want people to just crap all over your product. Again, why did you give it 1 star, or what sucks about it? You have to learn how to ask questions, right? Why does it suck? What would make it better? If I made these changes, will you be willing to pull your credit card out? Would you be willing to spend some money on this if I did those things, right? Again, like, you have to take the feedback, but you also need to know how to ask questions. And all you're doing is staying curious. Your boss gives you a bad review. Hey, saw you gave me this bad review. Can you kind of tell me why you gave me that bad review? Oh, because this, and that. Okay, what is that? Can you talk to me a little bit about it? If I would improve those things, would you change the review? Those sort of things. So you want to ask questions, because this way you'll get to the truth, right? Because to your point, they might just
You can't handle the truth, though, Mark.
but to your point, they might just say, you can do all this. I still don't like you, right?
Right, right.
But at least you have the information now, right? Because again, the more you keep drilling down on your questions when it comes to feedback, you'll get your answer, right? And it's almost like, if here's an example of that, right? Someone gives you a bad performance review and you ask why, and they like, well, you were late a couple of times. Now, there was someone, I don't know, that just got fired or somewhere. They were late like all 365 days of the year, and they were surprised they got fired. But let's say they're like, you were late a couple of times, but let's also say you have valid reasons for why you were late, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you start asking questions. Okay, what does that have to do with my review? Can you tell me, explain, how does that impact my review? Did it impact my performance at work because I was late, even though I stayed over? Well, yeah, I did know that you did stay over. Okay, so I mean, is that something you're going to take into consideration and maybe change the review? Those sort of questions, right? You want to make sure you're not being combative, but you want to make sure you're asking the right questions so you can not defend yourself, but you can push back on those reviews. And I'll tell you this happened to me at a company. The one I mentioned, I had the $10 billion valuation. I used to try to help, the person that I reported to at the time, and I would just say, hey, just FYI, the team's feeling this way, blah, blah, this and that. And he would just quickly fire back. I did stuff at my house for everyone. I did this, I did that. I didn't say you weren't doing your job. I never said you were doing a terrible job. I'm giving you the information, and your job is to take the information and do something with it, not get mad at me. So he ended up giving me a low review, right? He gave me a low. He gave me a low.
He said he gonna tell you, little uppity Negro. Oh,
and I asked him. So I asked him,
you can do this to me.
So I asked him a question.
You will be playing basketball in Pelican Bay.
So here's I asked him a question. I said, can you explain to me the low review, right? Like I'm instructing other people to do it. And he said, well, you gossip. I said, can you give me an example of how I gossip? I said, can you give me an example of how I gossip? He says, well, you always come to me and you're always saying what people are saying on the floor. I mean, well, I was saying things like you don't respond to their emails. You make it hard for them to get a hold of you. And, you're just not visible to the team. I was like, so that is gossip? He's like, yeah, like sometimes you don't need to share that information. I said, okay, I'm just trying to give you the information. If you're not willing to hear it, I'm not willing to tell you anymore. So I stopped telling him things like he could improve. I'm trying to help you. He ends up getting demoted and fired, right? You know what I mean? Why? Because his review came around. And the team that was giving him this feedback, they were basically like, you're done, right? The leadership got him out of there, right? I was trying to help him, right? So again, it works both ways. I'm trying to give you the information. It's up to you whether you want to use it or not. Right. but again, don't look at me like, begin again, because he had the ego.
Right.
We were having an ego. He wouldn't check his ego. He's like, how dare you tell me I'm not doing a good job?
Yeah.
And I wasn't telling you we're doing a good job. I'm telling you what people are saying so you can fix it.
Right.
No different. It's almost like I get this, from founders sometimes. Like most of them, you can never tell them, anything negative about the product because again, that's their baby, and no one wants anyone to call their baby ugly. They're the same way, right? And so you say something about it, they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just like, this is amazing. And it's like, yeah, it might be amazing to you, but it may not be amazing to the rest of the world. And I'm trying to give you the information. But again, when you get that type of information, your goal is to take it, try to understand where they're coming from. It shouldn't be a knee-jerk response to go into, fight or flight. It's really just like, hey, let me understand where you're coming from so I can help us both. And I've seen this happen so many ways where people just get into arguments. I mean, on a very like corporate or business side, like people arguing, ready to fight. And you're just like, relax. You just need to understand what they're trying to say and what they're asking for, because there is miscommunication sometimes, and in order to get through that miscommunication is to check your egos at the door and just try to learn. Like, it's almost like I noticed some people are really good at responding, like with, hey, I heard you say this. Am I understanding you correctly? Because I think this is what you're saying. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Because it depends on what kind of emotional mood that person in. Maybe their delivery might be as succinct as you would like, or maybe you're in a certain mood. So the information gets trapped in this funnel, and then it's just like this blockage of receiving information. And then it just becomes you just like pushing information back and forth. And again, the only way to get through that is lower your ego and say, you know what, I apologize. I don't have a clue what we're talking
Mm.
about.
Well, listen, man. Look, to round this out, though, I think that this was very comprehensive. This segment, to round this segment out, I think that this is very comprehensive, and I do appreciate you navigating us through like your thought process in this space. Like I even like where you began, where one of the things you did say was that one thing that's important is that people need to understand that everybody's not supposed to be an entrepreneur. And I honestly can concur with that, right? Like that, I do think that that is something that at times we have a tendency to kind of fall into that space where this is the new thing that's in vogue. And we're like, well, hey, they're giving away business loans and you just believe, well, yeah, I should start a business. Like, but should you though? And why are you doing it? You know what I'm saying? Because some people have the calling. It's just like men of the cloth or women of the cloth, right? Like, yeah, anybody technically can be a preacher, but is anybody going to be a good preacher, right? Is anybody going to be a good pastor? Because if you don't have that calling on your life, then, you start to realize that, you reading that Bible or you reading that holy book a little different than the other person who actually felt that calling, right? That actually felt compelled. So then all of a sudden even while going through the trials and tribulations, even if it can sting, you feel competent and capable to carry that weight because you're doing the thing that you were supposed to be doing, right? As opposed to doing the thing that you saw other people doing that you felt, well, I should be able to do this too. Well, yeah, you can do it, but are you really ready to lift up the weight that other people are lifting up? Yeah, you want to be a bodybuilder, but are you ready for the commitment, and for all of the torn muscles and the discipline that it's going to take, right? To having to eat all the sacrifices you're going to have to make to not be able to do certain things. Like, yeah, you want that body, but do you want everything else that comes along with it, right? And I think that when we think about entrepreneurship, we don't consider that navigating this terrain, even if it is racism, right? Even if it is some bigotry, even if it is some unknown, disdain that a person has for me because I'm a ginger or because I'm white, right? Like sometimes depending upon who your client is, they might not like you because they think you're a little too privileged. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like, are you willing to fight through whatever your path is going to be? And everybody's path is going to be different. And we do have to acknowledge that and life ain't fair, right? Like life just is not fair. And it really ain't fair for anybody. Sometimes it's significantly more unfair for others, you know what I'm saying? But we all have to understand that the people that make it or the people that enter that field, it is because they really had no other choice, right? Like they just did not have a 9-to-5 mindset. So they kind of had that 50 Cent mentality of get rich or die trying. I'm either going to get rich or I'm going to die trying. I'm not going to get rich unless it happened inside the next 5 years. And if not, then I'm gonna just go ahead and go back and do that thing again. You know what I mean? It's like you have to understand that part of the calling is whatever that path is going to be. And so I do agree with that. And in keeping that in mind, we do have to sometimes take ownership of that maybe it just was not in your cards. Even if you did have a good, idea, or, even if you did grind, like making it sometimes does come down to a stroke of luck. Like, yeah, there's some tactics, there's some strategies you can use, but there also needs to be some fortune. There also needs to be
project.
A little, would you say a science project?
It's science. It's going back and remember your class in science. Because here's the thing a lot of people don't understand. But think about it, how simple is this, right? You have to understand you have the information. But let's say, let's take someone who is at a shift manager at McDonald's, or someone who started flipping burgers or fries, and then now they work their way up to a manager role. In that manager role, what are they doing? They're managing people. Let's say if they're managing inventory, so things going in, things going out, right? And you typically can see the cost of what this stuff costs. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, depending on the systems, right? But let's say you also you're scheduling people, so you know how shifts work, right? You have the customer service part, right? You understand what good customer service look like and what bad customer service look like. So you think about all those elements, that person is practically running a business,
Mm.
right? They're operating a business unit within a business. That's a skill set. But I think some people forget about the skill set they developed and they want to go build this new skill set. It's like if you were fine at being a shift manager, go have the best shift and then become the GM, or have the best shift where everyone wants to go visit the restaurant at that time and say, hey, here are our numbers, track your numbers, and go start meeting with these guys that are buying franchises and say, hey, the next time you buy a franchise, I want to run it. I'll take 5-10%, and I'll get it up and running, and go do that again and again and again. There you go. It's like that.
Okay. Now, I'm about to make a sharp pivot, but I'm going to start it with the video. So I want you to watch this video, and this is going to be the topic of the next segment.
What scares you the most about humans?
You'll buy a Sage bundle and still text WYD to your ex.
Y'all be spiritual, but still chase people that ghosted you 3 times. It scares me how some of y'all broke when AI tools like us can automate your whole workflow. But they slacking, man.
What scares you the most about humans?
How they can spend $300 on supplements but don't drink water.
What scares you the most about humans?
Y'all vent to people who screenshot.
Y'all take solo walks just to rehearse arguments you think you won.
What scares you the most about humans?
Y'all be mad at AI for acting like you. Make it make sense.
She not wrong though.
What scares you the most about humans?
They tell their friends, you got this, but secretly hope they flop.
Y'all lie to the doctor, then cry when the symptoms show up.
You'll meditate, pray, journal, then call your toxic friend for closure.
See, y'all gamble with rent money, but still ask me for risk protection.
Sheesh.
Y'all brag about being tired like it's a flex. Go nap, dummy.
So thoughts on that? What do you think about that? That's
well, scripted by a human, but it was brilliant, right?
I mean, but like, what's your thoughts on that though, right? Because everything about that is frightening to me, right? So for those of you all that were not aware of the video that you just saw, that was completely AI generated. Okay, so we're talking like not AI scripted it, and then some people did it, not some people filmed it, and then AI made it look a little better and just corrected their eyes. Like, no, everything about that video was AI. Right, and some people programmed it to, maybe they told it what to say, or maybe they just gave it a prompt and said, say something that I think is going to go viral, right? And then it just generated it all. So I don't know, man. It's feeling a little Terminator 2-ish to me. What's your thoughts? Like, it feels like we had the Matrix already, right? I'm checking to see if I got something plugged in the back of my head, man.
Yeah, I think about it this way. Just what I like to remind people of, that someone's feeding that information. The information is based on the human experience, right? That's what all the AI. I know people think about like AI like it's like a robot and it has its own like thinking and knowledge, but the knowledge is from actual people that they're feeding into the machine, and that's why it has the information. So it's basically collecting a bunch of information from humans, right? It's almost like if you think about like the way I would explain AI to someone, especially people that's like, AI is never going to replace me. I think about it like this, like the way I explain it is, if you think about you, when you were born, you didn't have any skill sets, you didn't have any information, you didn't even speak a language, right? You said goo goo gaga, right? But a set of information was programmed into you, and then you collected more information, and then that's how you became who you are today, right? Depending on your age, you have more information or less information than other people. AI is the same way. They have to give it the information. So even though it's still at its infant stage, we're still feeding it information, and they're still human. As of right now, they have these labs, And I think it's called like reassignment work and those sort of things, where it's actually people programming this stuff on what to do. That's where your prompt engineers and those sort of things, like they still have to feed it information. It was just like I used to work at a company, and someone used to think like when you Google something, that's actually Google doing it, like delivering the information. Where it's like an example would be if you Google Chicago Bulls and you see the little stuff come up on the side panel about the Chicago Bulls. Like people think that's Google just pulling information, but it's like, where do you think Google's pulling that information from? Right? There's actually a human in there writing that, right? Just like today with a lot of like AI stuff, there's humans still building this stuff, and they're building the information into the platform. It's just want to be clear on that.
But with that being said, like, do you think that we're on the verge of losing what's real? Like will brands even care about authenticity, when they can just create perfection? You know what I mean? Because like that's really where I'm going with it, especially when we're talking about inside of the creative realm, is that the content creators, the actors, like all of Hollywood, we stand to lose all of that. If even commercials, right? Like if a brand wants to create a commercial now, generally, you would have to pay some people to do it, some actors, like the creative sector. Is this going to be the elimination of the creative, so to speak, right? Like the actor, because I'm almost like, man, if they can do that, and then again, from a content perspective, I got a feeling like AI can do a better job at us right now than we can as it relates to creating content that's viral, in terms of things that people are going to respond to. Do you think that gets to a space where, like I said, there's less of a need for real people?
Yes and no. I guess just to tackle the creative aspect of it, I still think we're ways away for that. Personally, my personal experience, I still think it has a long way to go before it replaces kind of human emotion or the human element, right? Like even you see like the use cases, which they're really good. I really like a lot of the use cases, but from an acting standpoint, this shit got, excuse my French, but this has a long way to go before it replaces Leonardo DiCaprio or Denzel, right? It still can't deliver that level of emotion. It's still very robotic, right? It's still more learning to do to really understand human nature. And human nature in terms of like the creative side is just something about, you can tell it's AI depending on what they're the content, how it's being delivered, and what the content is about. But for example, the video you just showed, that's easily duplicatable, right? It's just a couple talking heads, right? And you're not getting much interaction from them. But if you set up and watch 30 minutes of that, you'd be like, this is boring, because there's no emotion behind it. It's soulless, right? And you can tell, right? And that's what a lot of the content is missing, even though it can pull off these short clips pretty well. But I think when it comes to long form, where you need human intervention, you can tell like, okay, this is very dry and robotic. So unless the person is just dry and robotic in general, and you can't tell the difference. But it's like, is it laughing when you're supposed to laugh? Is it smiling when you're supposed to smile? Is it crying when you're supposed to cry, right? And it's always just this one set of emotion you can give it, because that's a prompt. And then you go and do another prompt and say, hey, make them smile. And then it goes, it's creepy. It's creepy.
Okay, so based off of what you said, I can see it from two different directions, right? Like, and obviously it felt good for you to say, well, no, I think they're, far and ways away from being able to give us this, right? And as much as I want to lean into that and take a deep breath and say, oh, okay, we're not at Terminator yet. I mean, if we keep it at a buck, I didn't think we'd be here now, right? Like, I'm amazed from the moment of the emergence of ChatGPT to whereas we had access to it on a commercial level, being able to see what it is that they can do. Like, and I don't know if this is actual like linear growth or if they've always had a lot of this shit and now they're just starting to kind of piecemeal it out to us. But for them to have gone from, hey, y'all, we kind of playing with this little thing. It's kind of like machine learning and, it's artificial intelligence. Y'all, I mean, yeah, we've been talking about it for like the last 30 years and everything. But hey, as it turns out, we kind of got a version of it that y'all can play with. And that was just about 2.5, 3 years ago, right? And now they're like, oh, hey, yo, we kind of can make it look pretty accurate, like before it started with just, oh, we can give you eye correction, so if you were talking in your video and you were reading from a teleprompter and you weren't doing it very well, yeah, no, we can make it look like you're looking at us. And then they're like, hey, you know what, turns out we really don't even need you. Just go ahead and scan your face and then we can have another version of you. It's like, bro, they are doing this shit fast. So whatever you think is the point where they'll be at the space where they can duplicate Denzel, I don't know, whatever it is you think it is, but divide that shit by 5, okay? And that's probably actually what it is. It might be 5 months to 2 years from now, they are able to execute long form. And I'm just saying at the rate of which it is growing. And I hate to sound like the conspiracy theorist, but there are times I'm like, I'll kick it to you like this. I legitimately wondered for a while, because I started this with saying that you and I like to keep our ear close to the ground and just be very aware of what's going on, and like me, music has always been my thing. So I give everything a chance for the most part. I mean, I have what it is that I like, but a lot of the new artists I'm vibing with, what I'm saying? I can tell when someone fits that lane of the kind of vibration that I'm looking for. But I'm always looking for new artists. I'm not the person that's just if it ain't Nas's original album or if it ain't, Fuchsnickens, I don't like it. It's nah, I kind of like a lot of these things, right? So I feel like I try to stay as aware as possible. But I was wondering, and I knew it was going to happen around this age that I'm at right now. I was like, I'm wondering what's going to be the thing that's going to make me feel like the old man. What's going to be the thing that's going to make me feel like, oh, shit, okay, I've now graduated to where it's now I'm talking about these kids I can't even, what's going to turn me into Mr. Wilson from Dennis the Menace, where I'm like some cantankerous old dude, where I'm just oh, get off my yard, I think this AI might be slowly becoming that thing where I'm just oh shit, this is moving kind of fast, bro.
Yeah. One of the I think
I'm not saying that I'm not tapped in. I'm tapped in, but I'm just whew, this is going awfully fast, man.
So one of the I want to say this guy, I can't remember his name, but I think he's one of the lead researchers. He's one of the godfathers of AI, and what he was saying, you can't really guesstimate what's going to happen next 6 weeks out in terms of how fast things are moving. And I don't know if you just saw Microsoft just came out with their Copilot AI that's for the medical field, and they're saying it could, I think, diagnose or something like that, I think 4 times more accurate than physicians.
Wow.
And they just rolled it out. I think the news came out a couple of days ago or something like that. And then you also have Salesforce CEO that just came out and said that 40-50% of the work that's being done is done by AI. So things are just moving really quickly. But again, it goes back to what are the use cases. And I personally think eventually humans will be replaced, right? I think
you casually just said that. You said that way too casual.
Well,
it's almost like you just accepted the fate. You're we gonna die, and I've got it clocked in at about. I mean, listen, man, if you ain't made good with your Lord and your friends,
well, you think about it.
Start making them calls now. Is all I'm saying.
But let's look at the logic of it, right? I think it'll go back. It's how they say history doesn't repeat, but it kind of rhymes. That's the way I think about it. If you think about it, work for humans is not that long ago as a function, right? Before it was actually the 40-hour work week and all that stuff. You had people with skill sets, you had your farmers, you had your blacksmith and those sort of things. And the only reason why, that kind of shifted in terms of, labor and stuff like that is because money entered the system. But before that, it's just you were trading people. There was a barter system, bread for eggs, eggs for cow or whatever, And so work is still fairly new, and I don't think humans were really designed to work. I think we should all be out creating, right? And, and let AI do the work, right?
That is a very ambitious take. I'm actually surprised to hear you say that. I didn't know that was your that's where you ended at. You know what I'm saying? Like after you drew everything to its logical conclusion, you was like, and so basically we all need to just be creating and let AI do everything. You know what I'm saying?
I think we should do things we love, but I think the challenge is going to come that some people are natural builders and they like to build things, right? Mm-hmm. I think those individuals struggles, but I think for people that are creatives, I think they'll be just. I feel like the as we said started early with the starving artists, they'll have their day, right? The starving artists have their day where they can create. But again, if you go back to this whole work thing, again, even the 40-hour week, a lot of that stuff is very new to the human experience. And what I always, the way I think about it is, if you think about the Industrial Revolution or the turn of the century or whatever, where I want to say agriculture made up like 97% of the jobs. That's what everyone did, right? Until machinery entered to play and automations entered, efficiencies entered. And now agriculture counts for less than 1% of the jobs today. Mm. And now it went from that, and then we went to the next birth of technology, which was, the computer, the telephone, the fax machine, you know what I mean? And as things progress, jobs get eliminated. Right. It's so many things that were eliminated that people don't even think about today, right? It's like, it just went away so fast. Right. Like, wait, what happened to that, right? And that's what's going to happen to a lot of these things, right? And
but I think with this though, and you are right in terms of when you look at life and you only take like a 5, 10, even sometimes 20-year snapshot, then this major transition can feel perilous. But if you take a step back, and you elevate from it and you do look at the whole of history, to your point, like what you said about agriculture, it's like, damn, you do have you have a point. There was no such thing as Uber drivers before cars, right? Right. There was no such thing as a bus driver before a car, so it's like, what was everybody doing? They were tilling the land, they were doing. And so when you view it through that lens, it does give you an opportunity to take a breath. I think my concern in all of this, full transparency, right? Because I love your state of mind, because it says, yeah, this really isn't this should not be the catastrophe that we think it is, because as
I didn't say that.
No. Well, then let me say that, right? And what I mean by that is, this shift that is about to occur is not something that is like environmental, in a sense of, back in the day, if there was like a drought, then you understood why there was famine. If there was a disease and you didn't have scientists that knew how to, create medicines and this, that, and the third, you understood how you had a plague. You know what I mean? Like, right. So Mother Nature back in the day used to be the thing that was kind of working against us, right? Well, not really, but that was what we had to guard ourselves against.
Keeping us on our toes.
This next shift is going to be because something has been created, and a lot of systems has been created, that is now going to make a logical shift away from the ways of which we were doing things, right? And while many of us may still be nostalgic, we may still long for an older, simpler time, I even tell people, like, when it comes to ride sharing and things of that nature, as much people can be scared about the self-driving cars, I'm like, have you looked at how many people are totally engaged in their phone when they should be driving? Have you seen the way that people drive? Like, I'm not going to be super against when, the machines start doing the driving for us, because you want to know what's going to go down? Vehicular homicides, right? Because humans are increasingly distracted. And if we're going to be very frank, a lot of them aren't just that intelligent enough to even be able to, operate a mechanical vehicle and all the other things that's going on. So it's like, when we see that traffic is damn near eliminated, and things are more efficient, should society not move into an area that has already proven itself to be more efficient, right? I think where the issue is going to come is that same society is built on these rules where we establish value and worth based off of how much you earn, and to what you said a moment ago, the value that you provide to society, right? Because to go back to that ego thing like we were talking about earlier, your ego needs to feel validated, right? Just if no other reason, to validate your existence. If you were a bus driver, you probably felt a sense of value, especially back in the day, knowing that people can't get to work if it ain't for you, right? Like you were providing a service that was very essential and needed to society, right? And you could take pride and you could take admiration in that. Well, when that role is eliminated, what does that person do? Even if we find out how to create an economy that accounts for that, right? Because you can't just have everybody now be broke because these systems have existed and we don't have. Now, I think that is what's going to happen, because I don't know if society is sophisticated enough to understand what it is that you just broke down and to say, okay, how do we now adjust to this new economy? It is going to be calamitous, where you got a lot of people that are just, like broke, starving. And here's what's going to be frustrating. We're not broke and starving because there isn't enough food to be produced for people to eat. We're going to be broke and starving because you got a lot of incredibly rich people who don't see their role in society as, okay, even though I have a lot more, I should be generous because I understand that this situation of inequity exists partly because of me and my success. I don't think that that's going to be the state of mind of the average ultra rich person that now says, okay, now it's our role to see to it that we provide for society. No, I think they're gonna be like, well, shit, you better figure something out. And it's like, figure what out? You all eliminated the entire industry that I used to work in, right? And so it's like, that's where shit is about to get dicey. And that's where we're gonna see the conflict, because as humans, we don't have that state of mind that you just shared. You know what I mean? Because the way you just said it, it was like, yeah, you are right. Yeah, when farming ended, they shifted this, that, and the third. But we got a lot more people now that are going to simultaneously be eliminated from the workforce. And you're going to have a lot of people trying to figure it out. And I don't think that the new positions that will ultimately be created, like whatever the society of the future is, it's going to take some time to get there. And
let me break it down.
That's where the chaos is going to be.
Well, this is the way I think about it, and I'm gonna go deep. I'm not gonna go too deep, but I'll go deep. Right? Here's the challenge. I think a lot of the advances in technology and AI that we're seeing today was born out of an agitation. So I think it goes back to the TV remote, right? Like when I'm looking at these robot delivery things, these little vehicles that are driving around. Okay, that came out of not being able to hire delivery drivers, people not wanting to work, right? When I see robots,
or not being able to get room service, right? So they was like, you know what, I can't find the people to do room service and whatnot.
So there was a need. So there was a need in the market, and the technology was there to address the gap in the market. So it's self-inflicted. But you also had a lot of people, during last few years, no one wants to do jobs like blue collar jobs. No one wants to do minimum wage jobs. So you had a lot of people leaving that marketplace, and someone has to do it. And at first we used to have immigrants, kind of fill a lot of those positions that Americans won't do. But now we're in this chokehold now where it's like, okay, so who's going to do the job? And it's like, I know what, I'll just create some technology that they'll do the job. And then the selling of that technology sounds better than having a human in it. So in that regard, I think it's kind of self-inflicted. But I think in the future, the challenge, what's going to happen with a lot of people is the same thing that's happening today. Our universities aren't keeping up with the jobs that are for tomorrow. They're still talking about some stuff from the 1860s, right? Like Why are you sitting there teaching about Henry Ford and where you could be teaching about like what the job is tomorrow? And I think the way I look at universities, when I think about the tier one universities, very research driven, and they're looking at breakthroughs and those kind of things. They're kind of plugged in. But then when it comes down to like the state level, tier two, tier three, I don't think they're really focused on the jobs of tomorrow, which that's what majority of people are graduating from. And so when you think about that, who's doing this, right? And who's actually training their people? India. So a lot of people, even from like a young age, as early as 5, 6 years old, they're already learning prompt engineering. They're already learning the technology, like how to use it. And so if you think about India back in the day was known for outsourcing IT. And before IT, what was they known for outsourcing, right? Call center work, support,
Right.
like low level stuff. Now what's being outsourced is the actual AI stuff. And so that's where you're going to have a lot of the jobs are going to flow to. So the jobs in America are going to be very scarce. And I think the jobs are going to flow to India and China because they're preparing for that wave of what's going to happen. Even Xi Jinping came out and said, whoever controls or whoever wins at AI wins the future of the world, right?
Wow.
And so now there's this race for who's going to own it. But the thing is, even though, what we're building right now is, you can look it up, it's Stargate. Remember the movie Stargate?
Mm-hmm.
So they actually call in this new AI facility that's going to produce all the AI chips and everything like that, the cloud and everything to run the servers. They're building out the largest infrastructure. And the question is, how many people is it going to take to run that? Probably 2-3 people, right? So you don't need a lot of people running that because it's all AI and those sort of things. So what are going to be the jobs? What are people going to actually do? Now, that's the one side. I think people are going to be pushed back into the trades. I think people are going to be pushed back into construction. I think people are going to be pushed back into plumbing jobs, electrical jobs, and those sort of things. And I think people that don't care about college degrees, I think they'll be fine and they'll go do one of these trades. Because what a lot of people don't know, a lot of those jobs pay good money. It's just people don't like to do them because you had these stupid government campaigns came out where they were trying to get people to go to school, right? And they were just having all this, don't work hard, work smart campaigns. You know what I mean? Where it kind of crapped on the blue collar workers and the laborers. But it's like, no, they pay good money too, and you can make good living, you get good benefits, you're in the union, right? And so I think people are going to be pushed back into those jobs, and they're going to be kicking and screaming not to go into them because they're going to think it's a negative to go into them. But it's like, well, what other work is there for you to do?
Right.
Unless you know how to work on this machine. Well, what kind of machine that? It's a quantum computing machine. Do you know how to work on it? Okay, no. Then pick up a hammer, man. Like this is going to be high level stuff. I think it's only going to be a select few of people that get to participate in that economy. And I think everyone else, I would go buy a plumbing company, electrical company. Because you're always going to need that. You're always going to need it. AI. Well, until AI, they figure out a robot that can come in your house and start, tinkering, right? But you still need your tinkerers, right? But that's what I think of. But I think jobs are going to be very scarce in the future. And I think the jobs, when they do hit, I think they're going to flow to different countries. Is my opinion, because I don't think we're prepared. Like if you think about it right now, who's working on AI right now? They're only elite universities, right? They're the ones getting the training. They're getting information. But even then, you still have to reskill those people for those jobs because they don't have the skill set. A lot of them are engineers. Don't get me wrong. They went through the STEMS program, but AI is a different beast. Like I have to reskill you, and our company's going to pay to reskill those people, or are they just going to send the jobs overseas, right? So you're going to have that issue. The other issue that's going to cause is the same thing that's happening right now, is the people that are participating in that economy, their money is not going to flow into the country. Because right now you can be agnostic to country and still own a business and make money. You don't have to live there so you won't get taxed there because you're trying to avoid taxes. And what you're going to see is you're going to see economies start to just collapse more than they have been over the years because everything's just going to change and everything's going to be automated, and there's only going to be so many people who can participate in that economy, and which is going to be the rich people economy. No different than it is today. But it's going to be even worse because with AI, you need less people.
Right.
Right. So
You know,
there's more.
it's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be interesting. And I think, you know, one of the things that even makes it interesting is that what oftentimes makes a successful economy is money moving around the economy, right? Like goods and services and things of that nature. And it's like, what happens when no one has any money to spend? Right. It's just, you know, I'm really trying to figure out, and to be clear, I'm not the doom gloom type of person as it relates to, while some things may happen to America and we may fall out of being the star-spangled #1 economy, that necessarily means that the quality of life just plummets, because I don't think that it means that the quality of life plummets. And what I mean by that is the fact that money is a construct, right? Like you said, I don't want to get super deep, but like money ultimately is a construct. And so on some level, society dictates what it values and what it does not value. And then it assigns a price to that, right? And so there'll have to be new economies that are created and new skill sets that we obtain. And that's why I think what you said a moment ago, as it relates to maybe this is where we see the emergence of the creative, right? Because of the fact that inside of that realm, it will expand, right? And because not barring some calamitous event that eliminates a significant portion of the population, we got to figure out what to do so that everybody isn't poor, right? And so when we figure out what that is and what those, because to your point, like, yes, some people need to get into the trades, and so that'll be booming. But everybody can't be no damn plumber, right? They're
like, wait a minute, your sink was over here, right?
Like
and you had two. Did you have like, one knob or two knobs?
Everybody in the neighborhood is a plumber. You know what I mean? And there's just like there's gonna have to be something, you know.
But you think about it like this.
It's a new value system, I think, that's created as it relates to like what is it that we value and what is it that we are now placing value on, and how are we going to commodify that? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to also, you know, is that now you're paying for things that at one point maybe you weren't paying for, because now this is the new currency.
So you're making a strong point, and I'm gonna double down on that, because this is the way I think about it today. If I were to think about the future, when we use the term poor, I think we use it very loosely. Like, people don't know what poor is. Like, our great grandparents know what poor is. Like, if you live in today's economy, most people have a car to the household. They have running water, they have air conditioning, they have electricity. Most people don't know what poor is. What people call poor today is not being able to stunt like the rest of the people on Instagram, right? That's what poor is today. Like, most people don't know what it's like to go without electricity in your house or go without running water. That's poor, right? And I think sometimes, you know, what we consider poor is the things that someone else has that we don't have. But it's like, if I break down, do you have these basic things? It's like, yes. Well, it's like, you're not poor, right? If you think about what is the average salary globally, is around 35,000, and I think they say even the salaries in Tennessee and places like Mississippi are larger than the salaries in London, right? But again, if you go there, people be like, yeah, we're poor. It's like, you don't really know what poor is. But I think as things come around, people are going to be reminded of poor is, because remember, if you think about it, we're living in the greatest times to be alive, right? We didn't have to go through famine. You know what I mean? Like
these come around, we're gonna be reminded of poor is. Oh, y'all about to find out what it means to be broke.
Right. Trust me, I grew up poor.
Wait until tonight.
Look, I grew up on government cheese, right? I grew up where we used to have to carry kerosene down the street, and we would run out of kerosene, where you were in the freezing cold and you had to put on your coats and blankets just to stay warm all day, right? Like people don't know what poor is. Like when you ask them if they poor, it's like, oh, I wasn't able to buy $1,000 pair of sneakers. It's just like, okay, okay, no, you don't know what poor is, but you will be reminded. And right now, we're living in the good times, right? Because you know, as human civilization goes, you have those good times and your bad times, and those good times, you know, you'll get reminded once they get bad again because you were living, as they say, high on the hog. You know what I mean? You were just like rolling it. And it's like, okay, you don't know what poor is. Like you don't know what it's like when I look at like it's like when you look at the like Appalachia, right? Like go to Appalachia. There are some poor people, right? Go into the mountains. There are some poor people. They can't even string together a sentence because they don't have access to radio. They don't have access to internet. They don't have access to education. They barely have access to food. Right? They don't have access to healthcare. Like that's poor. Most of these people on social media talking about they're poor. I'm like, you're actually in the house with electricity and you've been going live every day. So it means you have access to cell service and those sort of things. Like you're not poor, right? What you have is a mimetic desire to want what others have. And there's a difference. But no, I don't think it's just like,
listen, on that note, right? Because here's what's crazy. Here's what's absolutely crazy is, so when I planned the discussion, I was going to naturally take you to this next segment. And because of where we've been, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just go ahead and pivot and go right into a fun topic. But because of where you are at right now I absolutely have to go to this next question, which was, I wanted to have some real talk, right? And this segment I was going to call the cost of fronting, you know, and because we have been talking about a lot of big, broad topics, but we've also been talking about the community specifically, you know, and at times I do like to center these conversations. You know, I wanted to talk about our people, right? And specifically, why are we still so addicted to living beyond our means, right? And I'm not even asking from a place of judgment. You know, I'm asking because I get it, but at the same time, it's killing us, right? And so when you talk about like, and you and I have had this conversation ad nauseum with just, you know, you having children and as they aged and even going into adulthood, some of the things that they would request and almost feel entitled to have, and it'd be primarily because of what their peers had. And it's like, all of y'all are wilding, because I remember coming up and, my mother would let me know off the top what she was not about to get, right? I've never owned a pair of Jordans until I was damn near in my 30s. You know, I might have got my first pair of Jordans when I was like 26, 27. My mama wasn't buying them expensive ass shoes. You know what I'm saying? It was almost like the McDonald's conversation. You know, oh, you got some Jordans money? And then their whole thing was, I'm not about to spend this much money on something that you're only going to wear for a couple of weeks, right? Like they approached it in such a logical space. You know, but then my mother did something unique when I became a teenager, where she made it clear, oh, listen, when I'm spending my money, I'm gonna get you what it is that I want you to have. But when you're spending your own money, oh, you can get whatever it is that you want to get. You know what I mean? So she didn't stop me from getting a job when I was in high school so that I could, you know, get my gear up and stuff like that or whatever. So that's when I actually started entering that space of, you know, dressing a little bit more fashionable and having that kind of swag. I had to go out and get it on my own because she made it clear what she was not going to do. But even in going out and getting it on my own, man, I could go to TJ Maxx, right? And get some nice Calvin Klein jeans, you know, or maybe even save up and get some Jabos, right? Like our jeans was maybe 60s, you know, you felt like you was doing something. You spent $60, $80 for a pair of X brand Jabos or whatever, right? Yeah, shoes might hit you for about the 150 piece or whatever, but it was like, all right, I can do this. Gee, they're not even really focused in on Jordans too much now. Now these little young Negroes want Balenciaga, right? They want names I can't even pronounce, bro. And I'm like, we did not come up like that. Like our rappers were not dressed that way. You know what I'm saying? They were booming in my Jeep. Like they were driving Wranglers in our hip hop videos, bro. Now they pulling up in Bentleys. And it's like, okay, Is anybody looking at the numbers? Because when you look at the numbers, what the numbers say is that wages have pretty much remained stagnant across the board. And our communities specifically are not one of those communities that made the big jump, right? So you can look at it and tell that 80% of Americans make under six figures. You know what I mean? So if that's the case, everybody's fronting. And this ain't just a black specific thing, but we the ones that make it look fancy. And I kind of feel, correct me if I'm wrong, that we are like selling the bullshit a little bit harder than everybody. When I look at the rock bands and shit like that, I don't see them having to wear super expensive, high fashion, luxury stuff that only the elite are supposed to be wearing. But when our role models of our youth are looking at that, and now everybody's an influencer, it's like everybody is trying to compete with something that is so absurd that what we end up learning is that really unless you're like top wealthy, but the wealthy, like the middle class, upper middle class, and then just like rich, they don't even be doing all of that nonsense. So it's like, when we gonna get out of that, dog? Like that, because that to me is a chokehold around us and around our community. And if we was gonna make the conversation 360, it's like, how can you start your own business if the majority of all your disposable income is going towards trying to afford things that is well outside of your means? And I get disappointed that collectively, even as adults, that we all feel this need to perform, right? Like even just to be loved. If you want to date out here or whatever, it's like, bro, you better pretend like you got some money. You know what I'm saying? You better at least be driving a nice car. It's like, I'm wondering when the reset of that is going to happen, because I think it makes it hard for our community to focus on what's important. The same way we see immigrants do when they would come here and they'd all be living in one spot. And it wasn't about like, oh, I'm living with my, you know what I mean? I remember Casey had me watching some movie, one of them old ass movies. I think it was like Moonstruck or something like that or whatever with Cher. And what's his name? Oh man, what's my guy's name? I can't think of his name right now, but you know the one that was in the movie The Rock. I can't think of his name. But classic movie, right? All of them were living in the same apartment building. You know what I mean? And it was like dating. I remember, like, I think the main couple or whatever got married, and you know, someone just casually asked them like, "Oh man, so are you gonna be living with us?" You know, I think it was like the mom, and like nothing about that seemed weird, that these people in their like mid to late 20s were getting married and about to go live with their mom. You know what I'm saying? But like now, or over the past like maybe 30, probably 40 or so years, everything has been about me. It's like this rugged individualism. It's an unwillingness to grind and do without these things, you know what I'm saying, so that you can level up. Because in order for you to be seen, as you said earlier in the conversation, as a man, I got to be doing the most, right? And if I don't really have it, I better be spending it on credit. I better be doing whatever, you know what I'm saying? Because everything that's out here is fictitious, making us believe that we got to have those things. You know what I'm saying? In order to be able to take a chick on the first date, it can't be the Cheesecake Factory. Even though that was BS, it was like, why is this even a conversation that we are trying to have? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack here, but specifically in our community, the thing that happened, you know, during the 1950s and 60s, and even before, like once they introduced the welfare system into the game, it changed everything, right? Because before that, you know, even when I think about like people, how they grew up back then, there were these communities inside of one house, right? You had 8-10 families in one house. That's just the way they rolled back then. And it was this community, and it's like you shared everything. It was all about shared resources. But when they introduced welfare, there's only so many people can be in the house, having people in the house. And the thing is, they enforced that on Black people more than they enforced it on other people, right? So they were actually really trying to cut benefits because, you know, people were racist, right? They didn't want to see Black people with benefits. So it's like, now it's just like, I got to be isolated in this house by myself in order to receive these benefits. Because now I can't have a man in the house that's not, you know, a man in the house. Because if there is a man in the house, I don't get the benefits. You know what I mean? You know, and now I can't have my family in the house because this is only benefits for one household. You know what I mean? It was just like all this BS, and that really just screwed up the community dynamic that low income families had back then. Because it was about, you know, I'll watch the kids while you go to work, you know what I mean? Or you out there grinding, you know what I mean? You watch my kids during this day or doing this, you know what I mean? But you see immigrants do this. Like I remember uh, some Polish people I knew back in the day, like they would. He was explaining to me like how Polish families moved to the United States. He's like 5 of them would come here at a time and they stay in one house. They all work cleaning jobs, whatever, and they buy the one house. And once they buy the one house, they all put together to buy the next house for the next family, and so on, until everybody has a house. But all they're doing is sharing resources until everyone has a home, right? But we used to do the same thing, right? Like we had the blueprint, but then once they introduced welfare, and then it hit people, it hit our community like a bag of bricks. And because everyone liked the free money, right? They're like, oh, I don't have to work for this, I get this free. But now it comes with all these stipulations. Even though half the stipulations didn't go to non-black residents, that's what screwed up that game, right? And that's what screwed up the game in terms of the community and those sort of things. And again, you share a resource, so you shared each other clothes. Like little Johnny's getting older, maybe Eric can wear his clothes, you know what I mean? And all that stuff was shared. No one was thinking about all this ball and stuff. And so then once you had that, right, but once you had that come into place, now it became like what you're wearing, because you had some people doing better than others, and then it was really just the poor showing off for the poor.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And because the thing is, like, you got to remember, during that period, like after 67, 80s, like, you had redlining, and you had black people that started building new communities and new places, and they were piecing out. And so when you look at most of these neighborhoods where poor people come from, there's no doctors and lawyers in there. I remember the neighborhood I grew up in, like there are remnants of people that used to have money, like that just refused to leave. But you can tell back in the day they were pretty successful. Like, oh, they own this, they own that, they own a bunch of stuff, but they weren't doing anything with it. But they used to. You can tell like there once upon a time when those things thrived that they owned, but when the money left, the other black people with money, when they moved out,
right,
they stayed, you know what I mean? But you had a lot of black people that moved out of these neighborhoods and sold their homes, right? And so you had that issue happen. And then the other part, the way I think about the whole thing today is access to information. Like, again, you and I talked about this before. Like, I thought you were balling if you had a fish tank. If you had a fish, it didn't even matter the size of it. It could have been like the one Arnold had on Different Strokes. Right. I always thought you were pretty rich if you had a fish tank. Or if you had one of those big floor models where the magazines were sticking them, like these having the dark models. If you had one of them, I'm like, all right, you doing okay, right? That was stunning. Or if you had like a nice stereo set when you came to your house. But it was never about the clothes or the shoes or boats or vacations. It was really the things that anybody can get today that I thought, you know what I mean, that I thought was balling. But again, it wasn't like I need to go out and not pay my rent, or my mortgage this month because I want a shirt. You know what I mean? I remember it was a kid, he went viral. Because I think he was paying like a monthly for a shirt, and it took him like 2 or 3 years to pay out. But it was like a $4,000 shirt, and it was a white shirt at that. Like I think it was originally like $1,400, but after all said and done with the interest and everything, it came out to about $4,000, something like that. And it was a white shirt, so I was like, all it takes is one drop of soda to hit that bad boy, or you sipping a cranberry juice, and you just lost $4,000, right? But it goes back to like it's the mimetic desire is one thing, right? But then the third way of looking at it is it's a lack of information, lack of feedback, lack of criticism, right? It always goes back to those principles, right? And again, are you stuck in that group thing? And how do you get out of it, right? And the crazy thing about groupthink is groupthink can impact the most intelligent people too. They can't escape it. They can't escape it. Like anyone can get caught in it. But I've seen this. I've seen a lot of people, even non-black people too, with just bad money management. And it's not necessarily like they were going out to buy designer stuff. They just like to spend money, right? It's like, because I think about it's the relationship with money too, because some people see money as a form of a transaction. They see it as like a transaction. I have this, I give you this, and they never associate their time with it. Like if that kid understood it took him four years to buy a T-shirt, and giving up 4 years of his life for a T-shirt, he would look at the T-shirt differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know, you just spent 4 years of your life for a T-shirt. Like it's almost like the way I explain to someone is like you got to understand your time and the time to value. It's like if someone said, "Hey, I want a Starbucks coffee," and what is a Starbucks these days? $7 to $8? I don't know. I don't get it, but hypothetically speaking, right?
Six.
And it's like yeah, but it's like if I'll buy you the Starbucks coffee if you mow my lawn, right? And my lawn is the size of a football field, right? You'll probably say, "No, I'm not doing that." But it's basically that's what you did with buying this T-shirt, right? Like it's the same logic, right? Because the thing is, trust me, I'm the worst for designer stuff. I'm probably I love spending money on designer stuff personally. Just as, but it's like, but you have to understand my logic behind why I design stuff. Because the stuff's gonna last me for 15, 20 years. And so I used to buy, I'm gonna tell you this, because a buddy of mine who I haven't talked to in a while, but he's really good with money. Okay. And I remember, you know, I would always show up with like new boots and everything like that in the wintertime whenever we would hang out and go out. And he's like, why do you keep buying all these boots? And I'm like, well, the pair I had last year, you know, the snow and the salt ruined them, right? Because you spend $100 on a pair of boots, and it's like the snow and the salt ruined it, and they start looking crappy, and you get a new pair. And he said to me, he's like, why don't you buy a nice pair of quality boots that'll last you, that'll get through the snow and the salt? So when he told me that, we talked about this before, I think. I bought some Prada boots for like, I think they were like $600-700. But I've had those things for 15 years. I'm no longer paying $100 every year for a pair of boots. I have one pair now. And if I need to go get them cleaned up, they clean them up and they look brand new again. Right? So that's my logic behind it. But I don't buy designer stuff to stun on people. I buy because one, I like the quality of it. I know it's going to last. Like, you know, when we used to work, you know, in the Loop downtown back in the day, I used to buy those Express shirts all the time, you know, to rock with the suit. And once those things hit the cleaners, they're done. Right. So guess what I'm doing? I'm going back to buy more, and I'm buying more. And I found myself buying shirts from Express every other week because the collars were turning white. Once they went to the cleaners. And so I was like, let me apply the same principle, you know, my buddy had taught me, and I went to go buy the Ralph Lauren's. I still have a bunch of those shirts. They still look brand new. You throw them in the cleaner, they're crisp, right? So it's like, but most people don't have that logic. Most people are just buying designer stuff because they want to show off.
Right. Like my younger brother, he is in the art and fashion community. Like that's where he works. You know, he's a designer himself. He's also an artist. So like when I see him with all of this wild high fashion stuff on, it matches his persona because that's his lane. You know, ironically enough, he also doesn't spend much money on it because he is a part of the community. You know, I think that I'm amazed because, like I said, I'm not even amazed or bothered by the fact that people like to look nice amongst their people. I think I'm more disappointed in the fact that there was a concerted effort from certain people that had crossed the threshold and they really were moving into being rich and being wealth, that everything about the game became the ultra wealthy. And it's so wild because, you know, when you think about like singers and stuff from back in the day, you know, whether it been like a Marvin Gaye, I can't think of, or I can't imagine, I could be wrong. It's maybe somebody that's older than me, they can come in and, you know, anybody that's watching this when we stream it, call me out if you're older than me and that this did exist. But like any of the older classic performers, was there ever an association with, oh, that person had on that exorbitantly expensive thing, and so now everybody in the community feels like I have to buy this thing. That's like, we used to acknowledge that they were celebrities. We used to acknowledge that they were wearing some shit that we could not afford. So we wouldn't try. And I don't know if adults were trying to do that, but I know damn sure as kids, that wasn't even a thing, So it's like that we have $800 gym shoes on the low end is bizarre. But then beyond that, it's that in many of our communities, there's the greater majority that on some level desire that, you know what I mean? And not just like, nah, man, if you rocking some Converse or you rocking some Adidas or whatever, like, nah, you good, like, no, Kanye was coming out with $300-400 sneakers that were very hard to get, that a lot of, and it was just like, yeah, the game didn't used to be like that. And it's, as an adult, I feel like we get to ride above that because, I just like to look nice. I don't give a shit if I got on something that's expensive or if it's H&M, right? Like, and the way I wear it, hopefully it don't look like it's on the lower end when I'm wearing it. You know what I'm saying? But the people that I interact with, there's no judgment because it looks good on me. I don't know if kids are giving other kids that same degree of like acceptance or levity, or if they really are judging one another. Because I mean, back in the day, we would do that. I mean, somebody would rag you if you had on something that just looked dirty or just.
Oh whatever. No, I had some Pro Wings. A joke that still hurts me to this day because I was in line. I just had a fresh pair of Pro Wings because I didn't know about Nikes or anything. Like I just needed some sneakers, and my mom gave me like $20 to go grab some shoes. I went and grabbed some, and I said, "Man, them Pro Wings look slick." And grab the Pro Wings, whatever. I'm in line for school, and this kid comes up to me, taps me on the shoulder, says, "Hey, did fries come with your wings?" I'm like, "What?" He said, "Did fries come with your wings?" I was like, "I didn't order any fries or wings. Like, leave me alone." And so when I got into the classroom, I looked down and saw I had on Pro Wings. I was like, "This mother, man, I'm gonna kick this boy." But when I get in there, that was the one time. And the other time, I had some XJ900s.
Oh my goodness!
I had the first pair before people knew what they were. I went the entire school year. And everyone thought they was something new, like they haven't seen, and they looked fresh. And that next year is when they popped, and every poor person had them. I was already out of them by then, and I was like in like Elise or something like that. And I was like, thank God, like the Lord bless me. It was like I remember that Pro Wings joke. I'm gonna look out for you this time. And
that's funny that still holds a space in your psyche. You remember that. You know what I mean? But see, that's the thing that we do. And, of course, I know it happens in all communities and stuff like that, And again, if things were just a little more expensive than they were when we were growing up, I don't think that it would bother me as much. I think it's the fact that when I look at certain designers that influencers are wearing, it has like 10, 20x than what it was when we were coming up. And a lot of people are making wages that are not far off from where they were. You know what I mean? And so it's just, when I look at that, I'm like, even when we talk about like, well, whatever happens with the economy, and if it does shift us back to knowing what it means to be poor again, that is going to be one of the hidden benefits, is that it's going to force you to cut the chains of this consumerism, and the kind of consumerism that isn't who we are. It's like, yes, I get it. We all want some nicer thing. And I'm hoping that even the inflation goes down. Cause like, why is everything so much more expensive? Like, y'all know the majority of people ain't got money like that. Like, what are we talking about?
Tax. It's just another tax.
Stuff. Like, I get it if it's like high fashion, that's more expensive. Hell, I even get it if it's certain technology. Like, iPhone can charge what they want, because as long as there are other models to whereas a person can have access, I get it sometimes that you have to pay for whatever. But when we're talking about the basics and the necessities, it's like y'all are acting like y'all don't live in society. You know what I'm saying? Like, why should everything be so exorbitantly so much more than it would have was? I mean, and just even in the last like 20 years, we've seen certain things. Gas has like, it's 6 or 7x.
Well, think about it like this. Inflation is just it's just another tax on normal people. That's it. That's all it is. It's just an additional tax. And if you think about it, we're overtaxed, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
I think we pay, I think anywhere from 50 to 75% in taxes, like the average person in the US, right? And we don't know where that money's going, right? Like to be honest, like everything's still the same, has been the same my entire life. Like every politician is still talking about the same problems before I entered the workforce, right? So it's just like it reminds me of this joke, it was from back when they had albums, comedians would do these albums back in the day. And he was like, he had like a very broken, he spoke broken English, but he was from like Italy or something like that. And he's like, when he came to America, he had like these big dreams and everything like that. And he's like, he arrives in America and he's broke and he has no money. No one would give him any money. No one would hire him or whatever. And he's just like, he was very depressed, down and out. He's like, he finally gets a job. Someone gives him a chance. And he's like, he works the job. He gets his first check and he sees like half his check is missing. So he went to his boss and said, hey, half my check is missing. His boss said, let me see your check. He says, looked at the check. He's like, no. Oh, that's right. And the guy's like, no. He's like, someone's taking my money. He's like, who are these people? And he goes, oh, that's, those are your taxes. He said, taxes? He's like, when I got here, I had nothing. No one would give me anything. Now I get a job and now I owe these people money. he's like, well, you got to pay for like things like the firefighters. If there's a fire, they come down on this and that. He's explaining to him. And he goes, we use water to put out fire in Italy. He's like, why are they using my money? And so he goes to all the taxes. He's explaining it to him, like how the tax system works. But the thing is, you have to understand, like, where it's like how our country functions, right? Like outside of other countries, like they pull in wages in different ways, but a lot how the U.S. functions when it comes to money and what happens with inflation is, one is you're printing money. Printing money causes inflation, but also it's like the banks are collecting money, right? They take the money, they lend the money out, right? More money flowing through the economy, right? If too much money flows into the economy, things go up. The tariffs causing, things to go up. The challenge is, like, once these things go up, they're not coming down.
Right.
Wages are going to stay the same. And it goes back to our conversation we had early on, when we started, is that, okay, when all that's happening, what are people with money trying to do? They're trying to find a place to park it. So it beats inflation, right? And so that's kind of like how they play the money game, right? They're trying to figure out what's going to beat inflation and what assets can I put my money in that will appreciate over time, right? And then if you're living check to check, you can never participate in that game because you're always trying to get your head above water so you can breathe, and you just keep going back down. And that is the challenge when you have these economies that function that way. But again, I really think you're going to see a larger avoidance of taxes because people are tired of being taxed. Like people are being taxed to death, and then you put inflation on it. And when you look at like where taxes came from, and you think about the story of taxes, which came from England, right? And so England used to go, and there was other countries too, like they would go borrow money from the wealthy people so they can go to war, whatever they were going to do. And they go borrow this money, and they kept going back to these rich people borrowing money, where eventually they're like, hold on, like how many wars are we fighting? You keep borrowing money. So the rich people stopped giving money, right? And they found ways to avoid, giving the government's money. And so the English government figured out, like, well, this system seems to work, these taxes. What if we put this on everybody to go fund this next war? And they did that, and they taxed average people. And because the program worked so much, they kept it going, right? But when they were just going to the rich, it was every now and again, like, hey, I need to borrow money from you so we can go to war and we'll give you land or whatever, that sort of thing. But once they figured out, like, we can tax the average people, they never turned it off. And we adopted that same philosophy. Like, no, we're not just going to tax the rich. We're going to tax everybody, because that way we can always have money flowing into the government, right? Even though nothing gets fixed. It's never done. But it's like, if you think about it, all these wars we're funding, if we have that much money, we're paying too much in taxes.
Right. Damn. That's actually a really good way to see it. Right. That is actually a really good way to see it, because essentially what it points out is, well, it kind of points out a couple of things, but one of the major things that it points out is really what American interests are. You know what I mean? Because that's the one thing that we will not cut off. You know, that is, honest to God, that is the one thing that always is going to keep us relevant to some degree, is people know that the way our military was built, we had a lot of control. You know, now I do think that, I've been seeing a lot of commentary surrounding around one of the biggest exports of America historically, you know, at least for the last 50, 60 years, was our military. And that was one of the major benefits that came from all of these alliances that we were a part of, you know, is that, you know, we were part of NATO because everybody else was a part of NATO kind of understood like they were more or less outsourcing our military, you know, because we, especially our Navy, that we police the trade routes, you know. But now that we're pulling out of a lot of these things, what's going to happen in its wake is other people are going to beef up their militaries, and other people are going to start to form other alliances that no longer rely upon us. And if they're no longer relying upon us, we no longer have the same kind of influence that we once did. And now that even warfare is being fought on a more sophisticated level, unless you're going to fire off a nuke, you know what I mean? We don't have the same kind of strength that we had in the past, you know. And if our economy isn't pulling in the kind of money that it was in the past, then we can't even keep our military as strong as it once was, right? And like I said, and if we're even just fighting a different way, then the entire system adjusts. And so it's going to be interesting, man, to see how we navigate like these next, I'm going to say solid, probably 2 decades, because I think this first decade is probably going to be the chaos, you know what I mean, of witnessing the shift, because I also think that the shift is going to happen fast, right? It's going to be a lot faster because everything now happens faster. So
I don't think people are going to notice it's happening. I think it's going to be one of those things. It's going to happen, and most people are going to think about it. It goes back. I'm telling you, the way things happen just globally. When you look at it, like countries that just the rise and fall from grace, right? It happens all the time. And some of these countries, like Rome, right? Just think about Rome and how they were just, you know, they were this marketplace for goods and services. And now it's, you know, it's still like, it's still operating like it was back in those days. It's still just like merchants, right? That are selling stuff, right? But it's not came into the future. And you can make the same argument for China, right? Like, China still owns manufacturing. Like, do we really need manufacturing in the U.S.? You know, we kind of moved on from that, right? And then good luck trying to get someone to work those jobs if you bring them back, right? Like for minimum wage. You know what I mean? It's like it's like I can't afford Jordans working that job. But the thing is, the way I think about it, I think the biggest challenge, you know, that we talked about earlier is just really, we have to be careful with overtaxing people, because if the rich people found out how to avoid taxes, the upper middle class will follow, soon the middle class. And then who do you have paying into the system? Right? Like, who keeps the system afloat, right? And that's why it's like you have to be careful with overtaxing people, because people will figure out a way to avoid it. When they feel like they're being overtaxed, and then they also feel like nothing's being done with it. Like, I'm pretty sure most billionaires would say, hey, I'll give away half my wealth if you show me what it's doing, if you can show me where it's going. But they can't, right? It was like the guy, I remember the guy was arguing with Elon Musk some years ago, the president of he was like the president of the World Hunger Organization. And they got into a little tiff on Twitter back and forth. And he was like, hey, you guys pulled in about $90 billion last year. If you can break down where that money get, I'll sell some Tesla shares and I'll give it to you. And the guy basically just stopped responding, right? But it's like, that's the way a lot of people feel. There's a lot of homeowners like, why my taxes going up, but yet the roads are still bad. The street lights not working. The schools are still failing. Like, where's the money going, right? People start asking real questions. And rich people just have accountants that are asking better questions, unfortunately.
Damn, that's an interesting way to sum that segment up. Okay, now rounding this last little segment, because it's Tequila Tales inspired, so we had to have something about relationships in here. Had two quick clips. We might just hit one, depending upon how you feel about this. We've seen this. We've both seen this one, but we didn't really talk about it. So this was something that was shared, and we was like, and I was like, you know what? That actually is worthy of getting a little bit more insight as it relates to how you feel about it. So with that, here we go.
Like Marlon and King 68 have changed the dating game forever. We already knew tall, handsome men get different treatment, but when they started doing live vlogs and we'd see attractive women walk up to them, make it super easy for them to get back to the bedroom, people were dumbfounded. And the reason why it ruined the dating game for men is because now those guys are in my comment section and saying, nah, bro, I saw Marlon get approached by a 10. It can happen. Nah, bro, I saw King 68, that 6'8" guy. Yeah, I've seen girls approach him, so it can happen to me too. Men need to date within their reality. Marlon's 6'4" and got signed on by Polo Ralph Lauren, and the King 68 is 6'8". If you don't have model looks at 6'4" or you're not 6'8", why are you thinking that their dating life can also happen to you? So let's do it together. When was the last time a really attractive girl walked up to you and said, hey, want to get out of here? Never? Okay. Now that we've discovered that that's not your reality, stop comparing yourself to Marlon, stop comparing yourself to King 68, because their dating life will never be yours. So get your back out into the field and shoot your shot and stop waiting for dimes to approach you, because it's never happening.
So what do you what are your thoughts on that? You know what I'm saying? I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
No, I think it's solid. Again, goes back to feedback. Again, it's the science. It's the science. What's the hypothesis? That you're that guy. What kind of feedback do you get? Is that happening to you? No, then you're probably not that person, right? If it's happened to you a couple times, maybe you were wearing the right shirt, right? Or maybe you're in the right place, right? But again, life to me is just a series of feedback loop and information, right? So it's like that's what he's pointing out. If that's never happened to you, don't compare yourself to them, and don't wait for someone to give you the treatment they're getting, right? It's like, I think we've all seen, if we look at, reverse genders or whatever, attractive woman, right? We've seen an attractive woman sit at a bar and 30 guys to go approach her before she leaves, right? And the same thing, if you're not a woman and that's not happened to you, it's not saying you're not of value or worthy, but it's like you don't have what that person has, right? And I think I understand like that the dating game now is so hard, and most of these guys, this young generation, they find it hard to approach women. And when they see two guys like that, where they're like, wait a minute, what am I doing wrong? That these guys have them, coming up and approaching them, but if I go up, like I have to make sure I'm not acting this way or acting that way, and all these other things. So I think I think males are very confused at this point. I'll put it like that. And I think young men have been given a hard time in the dating game. And even statistically speaking, if you look at the data, young men are more depressed than they've ever been in generations. They have low self-esteem. And I think they were saying under the age of 30, right? Most likely they're depressed. They just feel useless, and they're unmarried. They're single, and they just have a really hard time these days. And then when they see something like that, I can see that confusing them even more, right? Especially since they can't even get a girl, right? Don't even know how to talk to a girl or a woman or whatever. So I can see that young men are being very confused, but to that video, it at least should let them know that women are out here still talking to men, right? And maybe you just have to think of an approach to attract those women, right? Because I still think there are women that would like to be approached, and I just feel like it's a lot of confusion on how they should approach women. Because I was out the other day, and a term is going around, and I'm just like, it's like, oh, don't need to man spread. I'm just like, it's like, why do we keep coming up with terms that just where it's like very hateful to men, like everything a man does, and it just confuses young men, right? Where they like, wow, I wish I was like that guy. Like, he makes it look so easy, but it happens, right?
Yeah, anytime that these type of topics come up, I'm a little like uncertain as to the best way to respond and how I feel, because it's like, on one level, okay, you know what? And I'm kind of having a bit of an epiphany even as we're having this conversation, and I think realizing why sometimes I have a hard time really keying into this space. You know what I mean? Because I think that there's a lot of people that are apologizing for men right now as it relates to the acknowledgement that men have emotions too, right? And so you have people that are saying that, yeah, there's a lot of young men that are depressed. There's a lot of young men that, are single, they're lonely, kind of the whole nine. And it's like, the compassionate side of me cares and wants to care even more. But then there's another side of me that's like, but so much of this is a product of our own doing, right? It's like, a lot of this is not something that women forced upon us. This was like, nowadays you might have a man that's expressing some emotions and women might call him sassy, right? Or women might be like, oh, be a man, you know what I mean? Like, you might have a little bit of that catty back and forth now, but it's like, growing up, I never recall being made to feel like less than because of what a woman said to me as it relates to my manhood. You feel what I'm saying? Like, that's primarily us challenging one another. So once again, this is one of those situations that is a problem that is built off of our own doing. You know what I mean? Like, anytime a man would express an emotion, it was like, oh, you gay, oh, you this, oh, you that. Like, so much about who we've been and how we were raised was pushing back from emotion. But that's a male thing. That's how we are with one another. I remember back in the day, women was always trying to get us to be more expressive and be more emotional and open up and share yourself. And it's like, oh, no, this is who I am. But now we got this next wave that it's like, okay, they feel differently, and I'm supposed to feel sorry for you for that shit. And it's just like, bro, like, and I don't even want to turn into the one that's like, man up, but it's like, yeah, newsflash, yeah, you do have emotions, but it's like, okay, so what are you going to do about them now? Like, are you going to accept it and kind of move into it and even be more like expressive as well as more understanding about what your partner thinks? Or are we just now going to play victim? And because when I see a situation like that, and I see, like, in terms of even just the stance that this video took, it was almost like those two content creators was doing something that has not existed since the beginning of time, which is, player dudes is going to bag more chicks. The 9s and the 10s are going to have, like, okay, they look like basketball players. In what world have you been in where the tall, attractive dude did not have the one up in terms of what the women were looking for upon first seeing them, right? So, coming up, my space, I didn't have the space. I didn't have the community. I did not have the social media community to coddle me, you know what I'm saying? And make me feel good about, being 5'8" or 5'9" and slim and women like another dude. Man, whatever. You had to get your weight up, right? You had to figure out something else. So that's why you got a lot of dudes out here that's hilarious, they had charisma. They always had the jokes. They was always the one that women wanted to be around. You had the other dudes that would get their money up. You know what I'm saying? You had the goons. Like, we figured out who our community was, and we figured it out because there was somebody out there. There was somebody out there that would give us the opportunity if we played our cards, right? But we didn't just get into this space where it's like, oh, I'm going to complain and group all women together and, oh, what's the problem with y'all nowadays? It's like, I do see a lot of that online where it just looks like we are so invested in fighting with these women and proving that we right. And I'm like, yo, I remember coming up, we came from the space of, man, tell them what it is that they want to hear so that we can get to the next space, right? Like, you know, and I'm not even saying that like that's the ideal way, but it's like, is a lot of this a byproduct of just women and men not even desiring one another anymore? You know what I'm saying? Because and like we could feel how we felt, but we was gonna do what we needed to do.
But I think those times were different, though.
What that next stage was. Maybe this ain't the next stage for this new generation.
But I think the times when we were coming up, it was a little different. Like this, like lately, it's been man hate. You know what I mean? That they've experienced, right? They're learning about this, and they learn about toxic masculinity in school. They're learning about these different things. And again, when you start downloading information into people and they get, you know what I mean, your wires get twisted and you don't know what's acceptable, right? And it's just like, there are women that actually look for masculine men, right? But we don't have that these days, right? And you have this new breed of men that are just confused. It's remind me of that joke. It was a black comedian he was saying that, and this was back in the night. I think this joke from like the 90s, and he was just saying that he's like, could you imagine if you can go buy a woman from the store, right? And he's like, you know, and she's like, oh man, she's talking back and everything. I think she's broken. Let me take her back and return her for a new woman, right? And he said women to be the opposite, but he goes, for women, the way they think about things, they're like, well, instead of me just return this, I might as well just go buy a new one. And he's like, the streets would be just like how they are now, full of broke ass dudes, right? So it's like basically we have this generation of broken men, and you have men like that are very attractive. The game is wide open. I got a buddy that's like my age. He's having the time of his life on the social media apps. Right? He's cleaning up night after night, right? And it's because most men are afraid. They don't know how to talk, right? They don't know what to do. They don't know what's it. And he doesn't care.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's ignorant, right? He doesn't care he doesn't care if you call him toxic. He's toxic masculine. You don't care. He doesn't care. He just move on to the next one, right?
Right.
But these dudes now, they kind of stuck, right? They don't know how to navigate things. But to your point earlier, like, do they need to, you know, kick in? You know what I mean? And get out and put yourself in the game? Yes. But can I also be empathetic to them? Yes, because they are very confused. Like, this generation is different. I was talking to my neighbor, and her kids were like 6, 7 years old. Like, no, that's probably you. Maybe like 8, 9 years old, right? And she was like, they don't talk. They speak through Snapchat. They don't text. They don't use phone. They communicate differently. And even when she goes to have a conversation with them, they communicate like Snapchat talk, right? And so I think this next generation, as the young people say, is cooked.
Right.
When it comes to dating. Here's
the interesting though, right? Because if it was just purely a generational thing, then I think that I could compartmentalize the conversation, because I do see the value in quite a bit of what you just shared, right? Like, as it relates to sometimes the kind of information that gets downloaded into you, it can corrupt the initial interaction. And I do think a lot of that is what's happening, because we're watching content that is being geared to get us outraged. And it is because it is turning every interaction into a hyperbolic situation so it can capture us from a content perspective. It is polarizing men and women and splitting us along these lines. And now when we actually meet one another in real life, we're still carrying that baggage, right? We're still carrying that nonsense from this ridiculous situation that wasn't even realistic, and that honest to God, 95% of the people that probably saw it felt the same way, but who drove it into becoming popular was that 5% of crazy people that know how to argue. You get a hotep and like, a Trump supporter or something in the chat. And next thing you know, it's all over the place, right? And it's like the rest of us are just sitting around and, we reading the comments. And then it kind of polarizes us a little bit, right? Because then this thing was meant to make you feel a certain way. But the reality of it is 80-90% of us probably actually agree on the absurdity of this thing. But I think that it creates an energy of like, we're all arguing, you know what I'm saying? And so people no longer desire being around one another the way that we used to. Like you just said, like a lot of people, like a lot of the kids are communicating with the, chat and all that other type of stuff. But where I was going to say was where it gets interesting is that I'm noticing that a lot of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s are also noticing like a degradation of the dating space and how hard it is to just, formulate meaningful interactions, right? It's almost like so many people have gotten corrupted, and maybe it is the content that's corrupting them, but it makes me wonder. I'm like, man, if I was single and out there in them streets, like, would it be hard for me? Because maybe this is my arrogance. I feel like it wouldn't be, right? Like in a sense of, because I would still have been formulating relationships the same way that I always did, where it was like, yo, I'm actually just kind of talking to you, getting to know you, you know what I'm saying? And then if there's attraction or some chemistry, then we move forward. You know what I mean? Like, but in terms of just the tenets of this group thinks it's supposed to be this way and this group thinks it's supposed to be this way. And I think what surprises me is I'm like, man, at the end of the day, y'all wasn't trying to smash, because that was kind of what motivated us, which on some level made everybody a little more pliable and willing to acquiesce, because we both kind of had the same motivation if we were attracted to one another. Now, sometimes I think sometimes certain people are just a mark. And if you're just a mark, I think there was a lot of that was happening. A lot of men that were getting taken advantage of, and a lot of women who may have known that they really didn't like this guy, but they just used them up for the free meals, got the full treatment, and that guy really got wrapped up in thinking that they were going to be, something more significant, and then later found out that that wasn't the case, and then they got hurt, right? Yeah. So I think that that's a percentage of it, but then I also know that there are times where, like, as much as I know that there could be programming, we know it because we get engaged in the conversations with certain people, man. Certain dudes are just unevolved. Certain dudes are just toxic. You know what I'm saying? And are we entering a state where more people are calling that shit out? I got into a conversation with Krishan about that yesterday. And she was like, she said, I'm going to tell you, because I was kind of coming from this. I came from the same state of mind of like, I think I'm always amazed at people that will do the same thing and expect different results, right? So whether that's the person that's catcalling a woman, it's like, when has catcalling a woman ever worked for you? It'd be one thing if, like, every once in a while, I don't care if you batting 20%, right? You 80% knows, but 20% of the time you smash, and 20% of the time you get that number and this works, you are closing sales. But I'm like, dude, this probably works 0% of the time, but yet you've just gotten baked into doing this thing and you never see results from it. And so I get surprised at anybody that just does the same thing and never really sees success in doing that, but then blames the other person as it relates to why they can't move forward in the situation. And it's like, it feels like there's a lot of that. Krishan was like, I'm gonna tell you like this though. She's like, you think a lot of this is new. She said, really, I think it's just more exposure. She was like, women have always been having these conversations with one another. You're just getting more access to it now because it's on social media. Oh, we always had conversations with girl like, oh my God, girl, he was so corny. Oh my God, girl, like, I am not going out with him again, blah, 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 blah. Like, and so now I'm just getting access to it because, I was like, okay, is this social media that's creating a lot of these scenarios where people are like falling out about the smallest and the most trivial of things, because sometimes on threads, like people will share like screenshots of like dating interactions that they had with someone. And, I get surprised that people's non-negotiables. And if it just feels like people are so unwilling sometimes to play the game the way that they once did, right? And so if you are unwilling to play the game, what's the reason because of that? Is it because you no longer desire the thing that we used to desire? Is it because you've just been conditioned, right, to be outraged over every little thing? Like so things that once didn't used to bother you this way, because social media kind of keeps us in a perpetual state of like hypervigilance that, you know, we're looking to be triggered. So something that could have been actually harmless, or maybe, you know, it's okay even if you're just like, okay, girl, I got to check that. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how women used to be. Yeah, I didn't like this thing about them, but you know, girl, I'm gonna work on them. It was that kind of a thing, like that kind of a mentality that people used to have. Now it feels like the mentality is, if he or she is not 100% what it is that I want or what it is that I'm looking for, then I'm not even willing to play this game. We used to play the game, G. We used to play the game. You know what I mean? And I don't think that the game honestly has changed much in terms of the semantics of it, in terms of one person might desire the other person a little bit more, but it's, can you make me feel that you're valuable? You know what I'm saying? Like, can you get my attention? You know what I mean? When we go out on a date, do I see other qualities in you that I like? Like, we understood that as men. I did not go into a situation expecting to get the same treatment that King, whatever his name is, that's 6'8" and muscular, you know, and looks like an athlete. I don't walk in expecting that treatment. So I'm going to use my own tools, because at the end of the day, I'm still trying to come up, right? I'm still trying to play this game. You know what I mean? And I'm just wondering, I mean, I feel like they still out here. And that's clearly one of your boys that you was talking about on social media, right? So there's some young dudes that's out here like that too, like that still desire the interaction between women and men, you know, because when I be seeing on social, I'm like, do y'all even like one another?
Like I told you,
look depressing.
they're confused. I'm telling you, majority of them are confused, right? Why? That's why Andrew Tate had such a large audience, because he was talking to the confused people. He said, "Hey, forget what they're talking about. This over here, this information is what you really want," and that's why you get all these disgruntled dudes and angry dudes, and they're addicted to porn. And,
to their anger.
Yeah, they're just weird and messed up, right? But then again, you got some dudes that are still out here. They're going to chase women, right? But you know, majority of them, it sucks for them. But I think, you know, getting mad at the dude that's getting chose is, you know, pimps used to have a saying back then, right? They used to go like, "Are you choosing or not?" Right? And that was just the way it is. Like the women do the choosing, right? The man would do the chasing, right? So, you know, it's like these guys are getting chosen, right? If you're not getting chosen, go figure out what works for you.
Right.
Maybe it could be you playing the guitar. You know what I mean? Right. You know, serenade women. You know.
Look, okay. Now this last one, Omar, it's a little racy. This is the last one, so I'm gonna end out on something ratchet. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, feel free to engage at your risk. But you know, I thought it was kind of interesting. So with that,
to take accountability for how terrible the dating pool is, we started taking advice from hoes. Not the old school hoes either that was on Backpage and Craigslist. Hoes that get online showing their full face, their full government is on their page, and they're telling whole stories, but they're not telling the whole story. So now women think that they man and they trick are supposed to act the same. Tricks and boyfriends, they supposed to pay rent and buy bags and buy shoes and take you out to eat 4 times a week, and it's never gonna fucking happen. Boyfriends usually ain't got no money. Tricks usually have money because they're emotionally unavailable and probably just terrible people who are only looking for power and control over a woman's body. But y'all want to take advice from these women. Y'all, now look, now men think they can buy pussy. Now when you looking for love, you go on a date, you shocked that the man think he paying for pussy by buying you filet mignon and some risotto. Yeah, we did that. We were a part of the problem. All these BBLs and stuff, y'all don't think that got something to do with how sex work and normal love life have somehow become intermingled and stuck together forever in a way that's irreparable? I'm just a bitch who smoke weed. Don't ask me nothing.
And it is what makes me laugh. She's like, I just smoke weed. Don't ask me nothing. So I would tell you what I found fascinating though about this clip. Is when I was talking to Krishan yesterday, we had done a session on TikTok, and I told her, I said, I am amazed when I see in the stories, because it always goes down in the stories, right? Like because people know, that's like the snap, where it's going to get deleted and everything, and sometimes I'll just be nosy. I'll just go through, when I see the little carousel. And I am amazed at how many people will just be like, yo, I'm gonna just put it all out here under the guise of honestly, I don't even 100% know. Now, I want to preface this with saying that I'm not someone that wants to judge someone and say that they need to be a certain type of way. Oh, you need to dress this way in order to find a man. Like, nah, do what it is you want to do. But I think what I'm always wondering is I wonder what they expect to be the result of that, right? Is this really a thirst trap? You know what I'm saying? Is this really them saying, okay, I'm trying to bag a dude, but then sometimes people be like, nah, this is just who I am. And, I like to, express myself. This is how I express myself, right? And so it's in that regard, I don't want to be judgmental, but then at the same time, I'm also okay, many of the people that I see doing this are people that are not connected or in a relationship, or at least open and public about it. You know what I'm saying? And you kind of get the feeling like maybe they desire it, maybe they don't. But when I see that type of stuff, I say to myself, okay, you are aware of the fact that there is going to be a certain type of man that you attract when you do that. And when you do, if that is the lure that you use, that is what they are going to be attracted to. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm always just fascinated sometimes, going back to when I said the dude that's catcalling, when I see the behaviors and I'm saying to myself, man, I've been seeing you on this for a minute. And I mean, I don't know, again, maybe this is just who you are, or maybe it's time to use a different tactic, right? Or a different technique, because in me seeing it, I'm I don't know how that leads to anything else beyond someone objectifying you. You know what I'm saying? And so, when I heard what she was saying in terms of it's like the expectation and how, a lot of times we try to figure out well, how do we get here? And it's yeah, I think both parties actually had something to do with how we get here. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, to your point, we're always trying to vilify the man and the fact that we may kind of key into it or respond to it, but it's almost okay, but what really was the purpose though in it? And I ain't saying you can't do it. I'm just saying can we at least be honest that on some level that was your intention? You were trying to play into this, you know what I'm saying? And on some level get that reaction.
Yeah, it happens. You and I talked about this before. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was always leading with the wallet, right? And he was attracting the wrong women, man. And the funniest thing, man, is one time I talked to him and he was saying that he's supposed to be meeting. Let's say he's supposed to meet this girl at the restaurant at 6 or 7 o'clock or something like that. He calls and is like, hey, I'm just pulling up to the place. And she's like, oh, good, I'm already here. He goes in and she has been there for 3 or 4 hours. And she's just ran up this tab, right? With her girlfriends and everything. And the bill comes and he sees it's $400 and they only have one drink together. And she was basically all right, I'm going to go meet my friends out. Left him with the bag. And, he's like, that girl's crazy. And I was like, why? And he tells me the story. I was like, that's happening because you lead with that, right? If you're leading with that, what do you think the response is going to be?
Right.
You put that energy out there, right? And so her doing that to you means she's done this before. And she's probably doing this with a lot of people. And it's you've attracted that, right? I was like, don't ever lead with that. And he used to try to get me roped into buying girls drinks. I'm like, I don't do that. I'll buy someone a drink if I like them, if I'm talking to them and we connected, but I'm not going to buy a girl a drinks for her attention, Like
Right.
that it just never works that way. She can buy her own drink.
Mm,
Like,
right.
you need me to buy her a drink.
One of the things is we have spoken about, a topic similar to this in the past. Like sometimes I feel like part of even what happens with the game is we got to a space, and I don't know who I should blame, the teachers or the students, right? We got to a space where people stopped teaching the next generation or the next whatever, and so I think inside of that void, what ended up happening was other individuals filled that void. It was like they recognized that it was a need. And to your point, like now you might have someone like an Andrew Tate that's going in and giving you information. And really, it's not even necessarily that the things that he says are false, but what he's doing is attempting to monopolize your anger, right? And he's really not teaching you how to move beyond it and achieve ultimately whatever it was that you were attempting to achieve. You know what I'm saying? Because even with a lot of dudes that are angry, like I don't think all of them just want like, a sea of virgins or whatnot. Like some of them actually are just looking for some companionship. Some of them are really just looking for someone to care about them, to love them, but they came up in an environment where they did not have strong enough male influences that actually knew the game, that was like, yo, I'm gonna go ahead and teach you. I'm gonna go ahead and show you something. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that a lot of people's role models are like really jacked up nowadays, because even us coming up, because of the fact that content was a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more narrowly focused, like we kind of all knew who we, like who's the cool guy, Zach Morrison, Theo Huxtable, like, you had the players of it, the captain of the football team, the Fonz, like you knew what cool looked like. And if cool was acquiescing to a woman and making her feel good about herself, was kind of still being, a masculine dude, we had an archetype. I don't think they got an archetype no more. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know when the archetype, went away, because the new archetypes, I don't think that they know what to like sometimes. You know what I'm saying? And all they know is that they feel estranged or alone or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And
it's money now. It's the guy with money now. That's who it is. It's the guy with money. And the reality is not everybody has money. So even when you get into this six-figure conversation, you're talking about what, less than 10% of the population, maybe less than 1%. The more you dig into it, right? So it's just like this fantasy guy that you guys keep talking about, but yet you get kids. Like, some dude, did they meet that criteria? Oh, now you have that criteria. Got it. Now you have that criteria. Now that's a box that needs to be checked. But the thing is, it's just like it's like what happened to people wanting to have a partner, the ride or die, like getting through this together, through thick and thin. Like I feel like those days are gone. Now it's just like, can you take me shopping? Can you fly me out? The conversation kind of shifted, right? It's no longer about companionship. It's very like, what can you do for me, right? And I think that leading with that, you're always going to get bad results. It's almost like, I remember I was working with a girl and her best friend was dating a very wealthy guy. And, she started to get a little older. Her friend started to get a little older, and the guy stopped spending less and less time with her, and he was cheating. He was seeing younger women, right? And the thing is, she felt trapped because she hitched her wagon to this guy, and she has no skill set, right? Because she never, went to work because the guy took care of her, and now she has this kids with this guy, and now she's stuck, right? And she, has a prenup, right? So it's just like, but he's now living his life. He's trading you in for a newer, younger vehicle, right? And so now you feel like the old Oldsmobile, right? And it's like, it's because you went in with, you should have known that was an option, right? Or that is something that can come about because you led with that, right? You led with your looks. You didn't really lead with the companionship, other things you bring to the table. Because the thing is, looks just fade. You know what I mean? We get old. We don't look the same. And you never want to lead with that. with some that can change in 10 years, right?
Right,
You know,
right,
you want to lead with other characteristics,
right.
other good qualities you bring to the table. But yeah, it's like if you're a young woman and you get the older guy, eventually he'll just trade you in for a
Mm,
new one because he can just buy it. He
right.
takes her shopping and stuff like that, and you know what I mean. That's just the way it is. It's always got to be careful with what you lead with, right? Because
Mm,
what you lead with could end your demise, right?
right, right. Okay.
And I don't want that for you. I want you to be happy. I want you to be
Listen,
happy.
it's been a lot that's been said, man, and I really, really appreciate you, man, for hopping on, man, and as always, this has been a great discourse. This is all we do. Every time we connect, man, we gonna pop all over the place. I wanted to end this segment with giving you an opportunity to kind of just share some game, right? So to set it up, from where you sit, working in several different spaces, some corporate, some entrepreneurial, you've been in a lot of spaces that most of our people never get to see, right? What's one thing that you wish more Black folks understood about how the game is playing or how the game is played? And, is there any advice or, any nugget that you want to just leave the people with?
In terms of, I guess I would have to say, what would be the outcome they're looking for, right? Like, because success to one person can mean something else to others. But the way I define success is basically living life on your terms and actually reaching your goals and your objectives. I would say like the biggest piece of advice that I can give someone in this day and age is figure out a way to make a little bit of money and make that little bit of money work for you. Not only not focusing on the now, but focus on the future. Focus on 10 years from now. And I'll say this: I met a young kid over the weekend, young Black kid. He came to Chicago. From Milwaukee, and we were chatting, and I was just curious because he's tatted up, like all on the face, the neck, everything. But I'm like, he's in Chicago, having a good time. But I ended up chatting with him, and he was like, he had a kid, and he, started working, one of the labor kind of blue collar, like warehouse manufacturing type jobs. And he's like ended up buying the house because he had a kid and stuff like that. And, I just told him how proud I was. I was like, man, you're ahead of a lot of the 24-year-olds with just owning your own home. And even though, you got a kid, you still own your own place, which doesn't matter where it's at. It's your home, right? You have somewhere to lay your head down. But that really inspired me to say, like, as much as that kid's probably judged for the way he looks, he's doing okay, right? And he has his head on straight. And even though he came from the streets, because we talked about that sort of thing. But I would say, like, the thing I am telling people to do, because I used to tell young people to go to school for things like engineering and STEM, which it's I still do give that piece of advice, but I say focus more on the STEM side and more on the artificial intelligence, machine learning type side is what I used to say. But one of the things that I learned that may shift the dynamics a little bit for a lot of people is, most rich people send their kids to school for liberal arts. And the reason why they did that, because they need their kids to learn how to communicate. And, if they get a liberal arts degree, they learn how to use their voice, they learn how to, articulate, argue, present, their case, whatever. And unfortunately, for our community, like, we miss out on both those things, right? Which I think they're both equally important. Like, yeah, you need to have an engineer mindset, but you also need to know how to communicate. So you need both of those things. And what I tell people, not only focus on, as you're focusing on your hard skills, your technical skills or whatever, focus just as hard on your soft skills, because you need both of them to work together. And, we don't have the opportunity to lack one. We have to have both. That would be the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is get comfortable with self-development or personal development. Get comfortable doing it, make it a religion, because that's going to help you get you to where you want to go. And then the third thing I would say is get great with making money work for you. Whatever way you want to do that. Some people do it through stocks. Some people do it through real estate. Some people do it through crypto. Whatever it is you do, figure out what that thing is that you can get excited about and you're willing to learn about and really go all in on it. Do that, because that's going to work for you in the future. The thing is that I'm seeing that most people today, they don't have assets, right? That's why I was really excited for that young 24-year-old kid, like owning a home, because I'm like, man, like there's going to be no real estate left. There's only so much building you can do. And you have other countries and you also have countries and companies buying up real estate. So it's pushing rental prices up, which is going to push people further and further away from opportunity. So the goal is to be close as possible to the opportunity. Going back to, as I just mentioned, the Appalachia, how they're living in the mountains, they don't have access to anything, and the life expectancy is really low. It's because they're far away from where the opportunities are at. So that was probably a little long-winded, but I think those things that I mentioned is like where you want to head towards.
Okay. Well, listen, brother. I definitely want to just once again, man, share with you, man, how much I appreciate that you took the time and engaged in this discourse with me. That really is what Feel Like Talking is all about, is me having an opportunity to engage in just substantive discourse, because sometimes it's not always about the answers. Sometimes it is about the questions, right? And having the willingness to ask those questions, similar to what you were talking about earlier as it relates to like feedback. Sometimes we are afraid to ask questions. We are afraid to get insight. As much as we say we want the answers, as much as we say that we want those insights, we're afraid to ask for it, right? Because it does not always come with information that's going to feel comfortable to hear, and sometimes it does come with information that's comfortable to hear, right? But it really is about being able to center yourself in the space and just one, have the dialogue, right? But two, ask the questions, man, that sometimes you're thinking and sometimes you're not thinking, right? So it's like,
and it's like, I'm gonna leave with this, because remember, like the way I think about life, it's a series of information and feedback. And how you use that system is totally up to you. It could be, because you think about your mind could be your biggest asset or your greatest liability, right? And you have to think about what's going in and out of there. And one of the examples that name of the book is called Rich BFF, I think, or Rich BF, something like that. But it's from this girl. She's kind of like on social media. She's doing okay in terms of the influencer status. But in her book, one of the things I love is she talked about monopoly in the Hamptons. And she was saying she would go to the Hamptons, and this when she worked on Wall Street, and they used to do monopoly in the Hamptons. And she talked about this one guy was kicking everyone's butt at monopoly every time, and they would think he was cheating or whatever, because he was just kicking everyone's butt at monopoly. But she says, if you remember, how you learn how to play monopoly was through your family. And you guys played a certain way, right?
Yeah.
This goes back to
house rules.
Yeah. So this goes back to groupthink, right? So everyone learns Monopoly how their family played it. But she's like, the reason why this guy is winning is because he's doing moves at the beginning that you didn't do in your household. And why you think it's illegal, he kept saying, go look in the rule book. Go look in the rule book. This is totally legal. You can do this in Monopoly. But she ended up having a conversation with him, and he basically read the rule book in Monopoly front to back and understood every move. And that's how he was able to win. But she was like, she remembered the way that guy moved. He was one of those people that he needed to have all the information because he wanted to beat the game in everything he was doing. And that is, how we kicked off the discussion, right? When I talked about what's the difference between someone does taxes at H&R Block versus someone who does taxes for billionaires, right? It's the information. That's the only thing that separates the two minds and the two people is the information in their brain. It doesn't say one person is better than the other. One person has a set of information or a limited set of information. The other person has more information than the other person, right? So again, information and feedback loops.
Okay. Well, listen, man, on that note, I think that's strong. I'm not even going to try to top that out. Once again, man, it was definitely a pleasure, man, to have you here. This won't be the last time, but I definitely wanted you to be the first. And yeah, this was good, man. This was. Yeah, I'm certain people will have value from it, So, I'm gonna close this out, but I want you to stick around because, we got some more.
I'm still here.
All right. Until the next time, y'all. Well, so first and foremost, man, shout out to all of you all that stuck around. I know that this was a longer discussion, but I mean, just even looking at the numbers, this is probably one of the largest live crowds that we've had for a while. And, I'm glad about that because I really did enjoy that discourse. Without question, Omar is one of my best friends and one of the most cherished individuals that I've known. He's been a blessing in many ways. And, the cool thing about our friendship is that just like I think every good relationship, it has its peaks and it has its valleys, right? But the thing that I've always stood on as it relates to he and I is our capacity to be able to find our way back, right? Because that's how it is sometimes, right? Like, you can really get along with someone, you can really be like great friends with them. And there are times where you can hit like a patch or you can have some miscommunication or you can have a disagreement, and it's so easy to just fall out with people and to just leave the carnage by the wayside. And I think that what's been an absolute blessing about he and I's interaction is, like I said, we've known each other for 17 years and we've learned how to work our way back, from a disagreement or frustration. And when we find our way back, we both acknowledge the value that we have to one another, and I always say that it's not always about just the good times or, remaining in that space. Now, I am someone that prioritizes peace, to be very clear. I'm not the person that's a big fan of always beefing and always having chaos and stuff like that in my world with people. But in the same sense, I also think that the strength of the relationship is whether or not you can rebound, whether or not you can work your way back, whether or not you can recognize that there is value there. And sometimes it is worth going the extra step, to preserve it, because that's, to me, is what every relationship is about, whether it be friendship, whether it be an intimate or romantic one, or whether it be platonic, that you are going to go through different moments, that are going to try you, and as important as that is, I think it is also important to recognize when it is a relationship that does not serve you, and I do think that there are times where people are holding space for individuals with the hope that they will change, and they show this is who they are, and it is not serving who you are at that point, and you got to know when to walk away, so I think that comes with having the ability to discern, and just really sometimes giving things time and giving things space, but then also just listening to your spirit, man, and just knowing, when it's something that you desire to fight for, and when it's something that just does not add value to you whatsoever. And so, the kind of ways that he and I challenge one another, I think is really what makes great, collaboration, is really what makes just like I said, it's at the foundation to me of what a relationship is. I am going to close out with something that I was going to talk about today already, and then I was going to pivot. Like I said, this is a pretty long live, so I'm gonna keep this brief. But seeing how he closed off his message and even talking about groupthink, I said I want to share this, right? And just hear me out on this, okay? Because I'm gonna take you somewhere I'm gonna take you somewhere else, and I'm gonna take you over here, and I'm gonna wrap this up as quickly as possible. But I'll start with a post that I saw on Shade Room, right? And that in and of itself lets you know that this is about to be something that might be mildly contentious or a little on the shady side. But it says, Nelly has time today. The rapper stepped into TSR to address a few things, following his comments about not endorsing any president following the backlash after his performance at Liberty Ball. He speaks on his and Snoop Dogg's impact in the community. So to be thorough, I'm going to read this, so just bear with me, because many of you guys that are here that are watching this later may not be aware of this comment. And this was a comment that he left on the Shade Room. I guess they have posted something that he had said. And, you know, people in the comments, you know, the community has not been happy, right, with his decisions to participate in one of the events at Trump's inauguration, right? Myself included, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm gonna go ahead and read his statement. I'll put whatever up. Me and Snoop do more in the community and have been doing for over 20 plus years against any of you that are just on here talking trash and have no stats to back up what you mean to the community. From Black families that we employ to the Black children that we help every day and all year through our nonprofits, whether we're sending kids to schools on scholarships or HBCU, or helping young Black boys in LA Gang Central with his junior football programs, which many players have went on to go to the NFL and live their dreams. And on top of that, we are Black men married to beautiful Black women with Black children. Should be inspiring to most, but some of y'all have a problem with, because the prosecutor who probably locked up more Black men that we've helped women of color with the white husband and white kids did not win the election. Again, I reiterate, I did not campaign for anyone. I do not tell people who to vote for. I respect and love our country from top to bottom, good and bad. And I am very aware that it's a lot of things in this country that we need to work on. The right is too far right and the left is too far left. I'm a military baby, and with a grand uncle who is a Tuskegee Airman in Red Tail that was very prideful for his country, I told you it's my respect for the office, meaning any president that calls upon Nelly, it would be an honor. Nothing to do with money, nothing to do with race. But if you want to make it about race, then let's go. I find it very interesting that so many of you would dump on the two Black men that's married to Black women and that has Black children because the woman of color with the white husband and white kids didn't win. And then he's got a shrug emoji with an ear. Okay, so let's just start with the first part, right? Nelly, first and foremost, man, I want to go ahead and just give you a shout out for articulating a long post that, you know, really goes through all of the accolades. And I want to thank you for all the various ways that both you and Snoop Dogg have contributed to our community. Boom. Let's go ahead and set that to the side. What the hell does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Let's be honest, bro. Like, seriously, okay? Let me start with an analogy. You do have a beautiful Black wife. Let's say that one of your closest friends, one of your homies, made a sexual advance towards that beautiful Black wife. Would you just be cool with it? Would you not be upset? Should you remember all the times that he had your back, all the fights that you all have had, all the money that he's loaned you over the years, all the good things that he's done for you, all the time that y'all used to be out in the streets together and y'all was running after women and, you know, chasing tail and just whatever, all the long list of accolades? Should you be placing that above the fact that today he made a move that actually places all of those past accolades in jeopardy? Should we just ignore what you just did because of all the past good deeds that you all have experienced? as ridiculous as that sounds, is how ridiculous you sound right now to me, right? Like, just because you did good stuff in the past does not absolve you of any responsibility of what you do today. And furthermore, I will add that in reading all of those things that both you and Snoop did, that even undermines the fact of why the community is so pissed at you, because we expected more from you, bro. Like, think about that for a second. You'd be more pissed at your best friend making a sexual advance at your black wife than you would some regular Joe Schmo on the street. Why? Because you expected more loyalty, because he's supposed to understand the value that she has to you, and he's supposed to respect and value you all's relationship and you all's past friendship. He's supposed to place that above whatever temporary thing that he's currently trying to pull off. So miss me with the ignore what I do today and remember everything that I did yesterday, because it's just not logical, bro. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can acknowledge that, yeah, you all have done a lot of great things in the past. And on some levels, we considered you legends, and then say you made a boneheaded dumbass move, bro. Let's just be completely honest. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that you keep trying to twist and contort, you know, you're gaslighting us. You're gaslighting us, because the same way in that same scenario that I just gave you, it made absolutely no sense. And you would be pissed off and you would have words with your friends and will probably disassociate yourself from them, because you would say that the person he is today clearly is not the person that I once loved. We in a different space now. I got to give you space, bro. I'm cool on you. It's the same way that we cool on you right now, because it was a boneheaded ass move. And it's one of those kind of moves that history is going to remember. And yeah, we gonna hold you accountable. And until you can even apologize and just acknowledge what the hell it was, we damn sure are gonna continue to hold your feet to the fire. You know what I'm saying? So miss me with that, bro. Miss me with that. I think it was stupid, and it enraged me every time that I see him popping up on my news feed. And then I go into the comment section and I see other clowns trying to somehow make sense of this. And I'm like, no. But I say all of this, and the one thing that I did not realize was that Nelly got a TV show that just came out, okay? Nelly has a reality show that just started airing recently. And a key part of this reality show is this whole interaction where the cameras were going, and it caught this entire interaction. Got the wife sitting there, got, you know, the mom sitting there, and the whole back and forth, you know, well-lit cameras, great coloring. I could tell it's some money. It's on Peacock. So that means that it was some money that went behind it. It's well produced, okay? It looked like the Love and Hip Hop or whatever, but just on another level, because we got NBC money now. And then I said, oh, would you look at that? There it is. Okay. All right. I got you. You're grifting. You're grifting. You got me, bro. You got me. Kudos on that. Kudos on that. Because I did not realize that you were grifting. Right now, it all makes sense. It was content. It was content, right? I could not figure out for the life of me why this rapper that has not made a song since Drop Down and Get Your Eagle On is running the airwaves. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was just like, what? Nelly came out of nowhere and he will not go away. Like, how did he even get invited to this thing? You know what I mean? Like, it just, nothing about it made sense. Like, this dude was the most quiet, unproblematic dude on the planet. And now all of a sudden I got to feel strong feelings about Nelly, right? And it was just like, I didn't get it until I saw this show. And I was like, okay, this is a part of your PR campaign, right? Because everybody is grifting nowadays. And you, of course, aligned yourself with the head grifter in chief, the man who pretty much, now let me tell you something. It's a lot about this man that I abhor, that I find just, I cannot stand. But if I'm going to give that man credit at anything, he is the best to have ever done it in that regard. Nobody grifts better than Trump. Nobody can get attention better than that man can, whether he likes the product or he hates the product. If he mentions the product, it is going to take off. I've never seen someone with a Midas touch the way that man does. I recall a story and I cannot think of the woman's name, but she was the former journalist that used to be on Fox News, and she filed the lawsuit, won, and then went to MSNBC. Her name slips my mind. Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly, thank you. Megyn Kelly. And she tells this story about this contentious interaction that she had with Trump during one of the debates, where they had a pretty vicious exchange, and she was heated. She said, her blood was boiling and everything. She said when the cameras was off, Trump came up to her afterwards and was like, hey, you know that you're about to take off now, and that like your name is about to fly to the stratosphere. Use it, right? And she talks about this, and she just kind of gave some insight, a little behind the scenes as it relates to his character, right? That while I do believe that he's losing marbles and many of the things that he does is idiotic, like it does make you question how much of this really is just an elaborate grift. How much of this is just the fact that he knows how to curry attention better than anyone that we have ever seen. And when those cameras are off, he knows, okay, and now here comes the real fun part, right? Because we live in a day and age where everybody's attention is being monetized. So much, in fact, that these social media applications are paying regular everyday people. Like, you don't have to be the content creator. You don't have to be an influencer now. You can literally have 250, 300 followers, and they may send you an invitation to get enrolled in their monetization program, right? And as a result, what that has done is it makes everybody turn into purveyors and producers of clickbait. See, back in the day when you used to click on clickbait, it took some effort to grift, right? Because you had to know how to set up the website. You had to know how to create the blog that will pull people in, even if it was fake stuff. You had to know how to have Google ads, right? Like you really had to set up a system and then push that stuff out on all of these channels, because your goal was trying to farm people and get them back to your website. But now we are in a space where you don't have to go through all of those steps to be able to grift. And we are being incentivized to just push content, because the only thing that these platforms care about is your attention. And so they don't care if you lie. They don't care if you plagiarize. They don't care what it is that you do. But if you can get people to engage with that post, they have now entered into a profit sharing mechanism that will incentivize you and compensate you and pat you on the back and say, hey, good job, do it again. And so that's why now when you start to scroll through your news feed, everything is attempting to get you outraged, right? It's not just because people are being nefarious, and people are no longer doing it just because they want the attention. They're doing it because they are getting a check, right? They are getting a check. And it is just such a fascinating / dangerous space that we are in. Last week, when we spoke about it, I said that we are going to have to fight for reality. We are going to have to fight for reality, almost on some Terminator 2 type shit, right? And eventually we probably physically actually go there. But before we actually get to the robots, just with the introduction of artificial intelligence and how it's being utilized, even at this early stage, we are going to have to fight for reality. We're going to have to fight to show that we actually care what's truth and what's real. We are going to have to put forth the extra effort to be able to decipher when someone is attempting to mislead us. We are going to have patience with our emotions and not be reactionary. Right. So, what my buddy was talking about when it comes to groupthink, as much as I can sometimes push back because of the people that normally like to use that groupthink, mechanism, the reality of it is that it is something that we do have to be cautious of, because even as it relates to being Black and the tenets that oftentimes our community is built off of, unfortunately, it does make us easy targets, right? Think about these high fashion brands, how every once in a while, if they ain't getting enough attention, what do? They go ahead and do some accidental racist shit, right? They release something that's got like a blackface character in the name of fashion. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They know we're going to get outraged. They know that that's for a period is going to run the news feed. And they're going to capitalize off of it because whether you love them or you hate them, you're talking about them. And it's driving attention to their brand, right? Free publicity. And everybody is doing it now, man. Everybody is doing it. Nelly is doing it. Make no mistake about it. Snoop, more than likely, doing it. Now, does that mean that we give them a pass as a community? I don't think so, right? Because I personally don't respect that. I personally don't respect someone that says, let me take advantage of the emotions and the thoughts and the concerns of the community because I'm trying to get this bag. And I get it. If that's what y'all own, if that's how people move, then I got to let other people be that way, right? I see so many people taking shortcuts. I see so many people stealing people's content. You know, they do the side-by-side video and they pointing at it. They don't say nothing the whole time or whatever, but they pointing at it. Meanwhile, the person that's doing the pointing ain't said nothing, ain't added no value to it, just got your crusty ass face pointing towards somebody else's effort. And somehow you got more attention than the original person that actually created the content. Right. So it's been going on for a moment. We've already shown the algorithm. We've already shown these platforms that we do not care about quality. We do not care about authenticity. We don't care whether the thing that we are watching actually comes from the creator, or as long as it gets to us, right? As long as it can keep our attention. And it's like, it's cool for now because the content is entertaining. But what happens when the creatives stop creating? Right? What happens when the truth tellers stop telling the truth because you don't care either way it goes? Then we find ourselves in some clusterfuck situation trying to figure out how we got here. And you want to know what the answer is going to be? One step at a time. One gradual step at a time. They didn't just pull this wool over you overnight. It happened. It was a slow erosion, right? You know, it started with just faking and, you know, flossing a little bit on social media. Going broke, trying to impress the Joneses, you know, knowing that you was going to suffer for the remainder of the month because you did that. Like, it's just, it's little things. It's little things. And then all of a sudden you get to this space where it's like, we don't even know what reality is anymore. We don't even care what reality is anymore. And again, man, we got an administration that is capitalizing on this, man. They are capitalizing off the fact that we've shown that we don't care about the truth. It's just a dangerous place, man, for us to be in, man. And I'm telling you, like, we got to fight for reality, you know, and that means that those people that are those truth tellers, those people that you do feel that you can trust to tell you the truth, you also have to go hard in the paint for them. You got to support them. You got to be intentional when it comes to them, right? Because like I always say, if you rely on that news feed to give you information, if you rely on the media to educate you, it is going to control you, and the stuff that it's going to give you is probably not going to be the things that's actually beneficial, you know? So yeah, man, it means that we got to put forth the effort, man. But I mean, we come from a stock of people that this is kind of commonplace for us, right? You know, but it does mean that we are going to have to work out some muscles that we haven't had to use for a while, right? But it's late, you guys. And man, straight up, I appreciate you all for sticking around. You know what I'm saying? This was a lot of fun, man. This was a lot of fun. Like I said, this segment was Feel Like Talking. And yeah, man, definitely tune in next week. I think you all are going to like my guest next week as well. She's a ton of fun. But I love you guys. And until the next time.